Welcome. Thank you for those of you who traveled long and far to be here with us. Appreciate it very much. In case you don't know, this is the God's country as of yesterday. We've been told by the mayor and the city council members, of course, by the city manager. And somebody told me it's the exotic Vernal. I did not recognize it until I saw the pink dinosaur. It is indeed exotic.
I think she's cute.
It is cute, isn't it?
I didn't see any live dinosaurs.
Just up here.
For those of you interested, this live broadcast of this meeting will be also viewed at youtube.com/UtahDOT. My understanding is about thousands of people already waiting to see this, including Commissioner Barlow. So if you have seen this or you're about to see this, please make sure that you share the link for the others and encourage them to give us the feedback. Let's start with the introduction. Start from my left. Donna, please.
My name is Donna Law. I am a commissioner at large, and my home is in Cedar City, Utah.
I'm Danny McCocken, Commissioner at Large, and I live in St. George.
Megan Holbrook, Region 2, Salt Lake Summit and Tooele, and I'm very happy to be here in Senator Van Tassel territory.
Lou Kramer, Commissioner at Large. I live in Salt Lake, and I echo that opportunity to be here with Senator Van Tassel and the rest of you. It's a beautiful part of the world, and thanks for all you're doing.
And my name is Nagi Zanadi from sunny St. George. I represent the rest of the counties of this state. At this time, I would like to excuse Commissioner Barlow. He had an early Christmas gift. He got a new hip as of 2 days ago. 9 a.m. he had a surgery. By 10:30 he was up from the room, and by 12:30 he was walking. And next day he is back in his home. He sent his love. And also would like to excuse Commissioner Evans. He's going to be chairing his last meeting in BYU. I would like to recognize Senator Van Tassel. Welcome. Thank you, Senator, for being here this morning. We'd like to recognize also Commissioners Winterton, Horrocks, and Todd. But at this time, I would like to ask Ted Mumford to come forward and welcome the Commission, I guess.
Thank you very much. My name is Ted Munford. I'm Vernal City Council. I need to excuse Mayor Doug Hammond. He apologizes for not being able to be here. He's out of town. We are grateful in Vernal that you're here visiting with us. We're grateful for the partnerships that we have on the projects where we work together. And on behalf of Vernal City and Uintah County and our area, welcome to our area.
Thank you. Now I would like to ask Carlos to introduce the Commission, the UDOT personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Carlos Braceras. I'm the Executive Director of the Utah DOT. And what we'll do is, Mr. Chairman, would you like the rest of the UDOT board to introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Shane Marsh, I'm the Deputy Director of Engineering and Operations at UDOT.
Let's start. Jason, you guys know how we do this back and forth.
Jason Davis, Operations Director. I'm Larry Montoya, Region 3 Project Manager.
Rob Clayton, I'm the Region 3 Director.
I'm Brent Swanville, the Region 3 Program Manager.
I'm Bob Helley, I'm the STIP Coordinator.
I'm Harvard Director of Program Finance.
Linda, it might be you now, going back.
Linda Hall, the Legislative Director.
Eric Radban, Region 3 Planning Manager.
Travis Jones, UDOT Structures.
Randy Park, Project Development.
Chris Peterson, Region 1 Director.
Ryan Adams, Region 2.
Robert Miles, Traffic and Safety.
Elizabeth Wade, Communications.
Charles Stormont, the Director of Right of Way.
Last but not least, Diane McGuire, Recorder of Preservation Fund.
Grant, you're last.
Grant Potter, UDOT Communications.
Heather Warhol, Commissioner Eastern.
Thank you. And we would like to also recognize Ivan Marrero and Brigitte Mendel from our federal partners, which they will have opportunity to speak to us later. Now we proceed with the local area presentation. For those of you that missed the tour yesterday, it was beautiful. We had a really good tour. Learned about the community, learned about what is available, and what the challenges, issues for the future. Go ahead, please, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to conduct that tour yesterday, and appreciate the effort to get out here and the time it took. You probably noticed, and we wanted it to be one of the unspoken themes. UDOT has a good relationship with our local partners here, and we strive to maintain those relationships. And we really want to serve the community and meet their needs. This morning, our Region 3 update is going to focus on issues that are going on here in the basin. And but before we get to that, I wanted to update the Commission on one current topic that's not here in the basin, and that was the flood preparations in Elk Ridge and Woodland Hills. You might have heard about that on the news. Our UDOT folks in Region 3, and with some assistance from Region 2 as well, really at the last minute dropped everything. We're able to respond to that request. And the request came on Sunday night initially. We were given the go-ahead on Monday at noon, and over the next 17 hours straight until 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning, we delivered 4,000 linear feet of Jersey barrier to Elk Ridge, Woodland Hills, and Covered Bridge, and worked alongside the local communities in getting that set up and the sandbagging efforts. And although the debris flow never came, thank goodness, they were ready, and we were happy to do that. So just wanted to give you that report on UDOT's efforts there to help local jurisdictions. So with that, our Region 3 update this morning will be given by Larry Montoya. Larry's our project manager that is assigned over the basin. Larry does a great job of coordinating with the projects with the local jurisdictions, and he's got a full slate of projects that he's been delivering, and he does a great job. So, Larry?
Thank you, Rob. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here today with you and to provide you with this update regarding our efforts here in the Uinta Basin. First off, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our progress with the UDOT 2040 vision. This vision was developed in 2014 with input from local input from our partners here in the basin. It was the result of a needs assessment study that was done to evaluate the Uinta Basin road system. And as a result, we ended up with a 2040 vision for the state roads that are within the Uinta Basin. And today I'd like to focus a little bit on US 40 and tell you about our efforts there and our progress. The vision itself was adopted in 2015, and it identifies safety and operational needs throughout all of the state roads. So on US 40, we're talking about 127 miles between Heber and Vernal. And the first section that we would look at here we'll focus on is Heber to Duchesne, which is approximately 70 miles. We have a couple of different lane configurations that are within the vision for each segment. So the first segment, we're talking about a 2+1 lane configuration, which is a lane in either direction, plus a passing lane that alternates direction at different locations along the route. And then for the segment between Duchesne and Vernal, that is a 57-mile stretch. And what our vision proposes for that is a 5-lane section, 2 lanes of traffic in either direction with a center turn lane. So I will show you here. This is just an idea of what we're talking about. The existing road configuration was typically a 2-lane road with approximately 6-foot wide shoulders. The proposed 5-lane section for 2040 is shown below, and the vision, we're proposing 10-foot wide shoulders so that we have space there in the event of a breakdown for a truck or any other needs for someone to pull over. They've got pavement to pull onto. The bottom section there shows the proposed 2+1 passing lane situation. So again, perhaps 2 lanes in one direction going eastbound, 1 lane going westbound. Then it will alternate where we need to have a westbound passing lane. This is some of our progress. In the last 4 years, we programmed $143 million, and the pie chart shows the breakdown of how that funding has been utilized. So, for example, 65% has been put towards roadway widening projects. There were 5 projects in that area. That's really our big steps towards meeting our vision for 2040. 24% has gone towards pavement preservation to maintain our infrastructure that's out there. 10% towards safety improvements, and that includes a couple of new traffic signals, a new hawk that's programmed here in Vernal, some school flashing, reduced speed school zones in Neola, and some upgrades to the systems in Duchesne. The projects I show on the left there are some of the major steps that have helped us reach the point where we're at now and are stepping stones to progressing with the 2040 vision. Daniels Summit, if you've driven this recently, you've noticed that there's an extension on the westbound passing lane from the summit all the way down about about 1.5 miles on that. Might and Bench widening was completed last year, and Bridgeland this year, and we'll show you a little bit more about those shortly. This one here gives us an idea of where we're at. So we're saying for the first segment between Heber and Duchesne, 54% of the 2+1 lane has been constructed to date. After we complete our Strawberry Passing Lane project next year, we'll be at 62%. So we're making very good progress on that. We've done a lot of work in Daniels Canyon to make it safer, widening the shoulders, and then extending the passing lanes. From Duchesne to Vernal, we're at 22% right now of the 5-lane vision. And 57%, I did that just to show that it's not all or nothing. We've got locations identified in the vision where strategic locations for passing lane improvements along that section. And I'm sure people have started to notice that. We have a Gusher project that's going to add another mile next year. And so considering everything that's programmed, we've addressed 57% of the road with these safety and operational improvements to date. So we're making very good progress on that. Some upcoming projects. Yesterday on the tour, Quinn identified the location across from the park where we've warranted a hawk signal. This will provide a lot safer crossing for pedestrians when the city they host a number of large events there in the park. Generates a lot of people crossing the street there, so that will be very helpful to them. We also brought up the storm drain improvement project on Main Street. This picture I wanted to show you is what can happen there. When we get a major storm event combined with irrigation water in the system, it just cannot handle it. So we've teamed up with the city. The city has submitted an application to the CIB for assistance on their match, and we've programmed $1.2 million towards addressing this need here. Some other upcoming projects, Roosevelt to Fort Duchesne microsurface. Let's see, this one is about 11 miles, I believe, of microsurfacing between Roosevelt and Fort Duchesne. That'll happen next year. There's also a microsurfacing project through the downtown area of Vernal, and we're trying to coordinate our efforts on the storm drain improvements. Hopefully we can get that moving and get the infrastructure in place under Main Street before that's microsurface project.
You're talking about the flooding that occurred?
Yes, yes. So another one is our project in Strawberry Valley. We have a westbound passing lane extension where you're climbing up towards the summit there. That'll be a 5-mile extension all the way back to the intersection where Strawberry Marina is. That project also has, let's see, it's about a 16-mile mill and overlay from Daniels Summit all the way to Soldier Creek. that'll be a big improvement to that stretch of highway there. There's also a wildlife crossing planned near the summit area where we've had too many vehicle wildlife hits in that area. We worked hand in hand with the wildlife division here within the state and identified a good location for that, and we're confident that will be successful, much like the one near Deer Creek was. Now, the Gusher project is planned for 2020 construction, and this will add 2 miles of a 3-lane section, so a lane in each direction with a center turn lane through the town of Gusher, and then a 1-mile eastbound passing lane to the east of the town. This is an ideal location for another passing lane, as before it was about a 15-mile stretch without an eastbound passing lane through there. So that'll be very helpful. This is a copy of the flyer that we produce each year. We get this out to the local agencies, our local stakeholders, the industry. We share this with the Ute tribe, providing them information as well as to what projects are coming up each year. We meet with them on a twice-a-year basis right now. And so this just gives you an idea of what we've done this year. We've had projects throughout the basin on multiple state routes. Now I would like to share a short video to give you an idea of maybe a closer look at some of the recent projects that we've done here. Let's see now, how do I get out of this? No. Okay, thank you. There we go. All right. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate that.
Oh, I think you need to turn the
Sound on?
on your video.
There's several significant safety. Over the past few years, UDOT Region 3 has completed several significant safety and mobility projects to benefit those living in and visiting the Uinta Basin. In late summer 2015, Region 3 maintenance personnel noticed deep potholes along the shoulder of SR 45 near Bonanza. After investigating, they discovered this location was over an old gilsonite pillar that had almost completely eroded away. The road was immediately closed, and drivers were detoured across a 12-mile dirt road, a major impact to travelers and daily outgoing shipments from American Gilsonite, the world's only gilsonite supplier. During the 1970s, gilsonite, a natural asphalt, was mined underground out of a naturally occurring vein that crosses under SR 45. The vein is up to 14 feet wide and 700 feet deep. At the time, it was normal practice to mine the material to within 50 feet of the surface, leaving a pillar of gilsonite to support the road and surrounding land. Over time, however, most of that remaining material eroded, leaving less than 10 feet of earth under the roadway, bridging a deep trench. Combined UDOT and consultant design teams studied alternatives and determined that a bridge would be the most effective solution in terms of safety, timeliness, and cost. Design was completed and delivered for advertisement in June 2016, and bridge construction began. The new bridge was opened by mid-December 2016, just 16 months after identifying this near catastrophic situation. UDOT initially funded the project so the road could be reopened as soon as possible. American Gilsonite was kept in the loop throughout the design and construction process and contributed $1.2 million toward the cost of the $2.8 million bridge project. In Daggett County, near Flaming Gorge, Region 3 responded to local safety concerns on US 191 near Dutch John by widening the intersection at South Boulevard to provide a dedicated left turn lane. Additionally, crews widened US 191 all the way to the Little Hole intersection to improve sight distance for southbound traffic, provide a northbound auxiliary lane, and improve the through lane alignment at the Little Hole intersection. This important and much needed project was well received by the local community. Construction was completed in fall 2018 at a total project cost of $1.8 million.
major reconstruction project on the Mighton Bench widened 5.8 miles of US 40 from 3 lanes to 5. The new road has two 12-foot travel lanes in each direction, a 14-foot center turn lane, and 10-foot wide shoulders. This $25.7 million project was completed in October 2017 and has increased safety and mobility along this busy stretch of US 40. With this project complete, there are now 9 miles of 5-lane highway from Mighton through Roosevelt and extending all the way to Ballard, a first major step toward fulfilling the 2040 US 40 vision. Crews recently constructed 1 mile long eastbound and westbound passing lanes along US 40 between Bridgeland and Mighton. Prior to this project, there were no passing lane opportunities for more than 19 miles, making this stretch a prime candidate for the upgrade as identified in the 2040 US 40 vision. Other improvements included shoulder widening and side slope flattening to increase safety for motorists and UDOT maintenance activities. The existing pavement was milled and overlaid with fresh asphalt between Antelope Creek and the Duchesne River. The total cost for the 9-mile-long project was $13.3 million. Heavy spring runoff during 2017 eroded a path around the existing culvert at Big Rush Creek, threatening critical damage to US 191. Region 3 maintenance closed the road for a short time when the pavement began to settle. When it was reopened to one-way traffic, crews monitored the situation and made emergency repairs to stabilize the culvert and the roadway embankment. Meanwhile, design on a permanent solution began in earnest. The final design called for lining and extending the existing 10-foot diameter culvert and constructing head walls to prevent further erosion. This work was completed prior to the 2018 spring runoff at a total project cost of $1.5 million. These projects are just some of the examples of how UDOT Region 3 keeps Utah moving throughout the Uinta Basin.
Well done there.
Thank you.
I know that's the same thing.
Oh, let's get back to it here. Well, I just have one more slide. Oh gosh, where are we? Help, Heather.
These are not your words, is that right?
I don't understand that. It's not funny how PowerPoint does that. It just puts in something. Yeah, 16. There we go. Well, that's fine. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that our collaborative efforts have been very successful here in the basin. We really appreciate our working relationships we've developed with the local community, the local agencies, and we're even improving our working relationship with the Ute tribe and their leadership there. And we're hopeful that our working relationship will continue to grow and everyone will prosper here in the basin as new projects come through and we continue our efforts here to make things safe for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there any question from Mary?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I turned my mic back on. I wasn't able to go on the tour yesterday. So Larry, are you based here in the basin? Or?
No, I work out of the Orem office.
Okay.
I spend a lot of time up here though.
Okay. Well, it's been truly decades since I've been to Vernal, sadly. And when you're appointed to a commission like this, you just see things differently on the road than you might have before you were appointed, and it was a beautiful ride, and I felt safe all the way. So thanks for the work that you've done for not just the people who live here, but for those of us who might be trying to find our way to and from.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, we're going to open up for the public comments. Any of you would like to come and express your feelings and your concerns, please speak to the mic. State your name, please, for the record.
Good morning. I'm Bob Peterson from the Uinta Basin Technical College, And joining me is Dr. James Taylor, who's the director of Utah State University, Uinta Basin.
Welcome.
Welcome to Vernal, and we extend our appreciation to Senator Van Tassel and Heather for helping us see the need to come here and express our request to you for consideration. Those of us who live in the community know the importance that the Technical College and Utah State University is to our area. Sadly, I don't think we have the signage that we need to be represented to those people passing by and even to our own citizens. So we have some slides that we just wanted to suggest some signage that would dictate where we're located. We're also aware that we have a very unique situation here in the Uinta Basin where both the Technical College, Utah State University, and the high school are within walking distance from one another. I don't think that happens anywhere in the state. We're very proud of that, and we're also proud of the fact that we bring so much in the way of economic development to the Uinta Basin. But maybe Ms. Law probably wasn't aware of the new buildings at the Aggie Boulevard and some of the
I saw them all, actually.
Great, wonderful.
I saw them all, yeah.
And without the signage, you still found us.
Yeah, well, I saw some signage, so maybe it's not what you're looking for, but I was able to identify.
There's good signage for Utah State University, but not necessarily for UB Tech, which is the technical college.
Gotcha.
And also not identifying us as partners.
Yes.
So.
And several years ago, Senator Van Tassel helped us with a sign for Utah State University Uinta Basin in the Vernal area and in the Roosevelt area. This sign depicts Roosevelt on Highway 40 in the intersection of 15th East. And we've just photoshopped a sign there that would indicate all the schools, making a right turn there on the opposite side, making a left turn to where you would come across the Uinta Basin Technical College, then Union High School, and then Utah State University, Uinta Basin. So we think it's pretty neat to advertise that for visitors that we're all right there. Likewise in Vernal, at the intersection of Highway 40 and Aggie Boulevard, we're proposing a sign that denotes Terra Academy, a charter school that's recently come into the as well as Utah State University, Uinta Basin Technical College, and Uinta High School. And we thought that would be very valuable for individuals to know where we're at.
One thing I just want to mention, when you come through Roosevelt, Utah State University and the new high school and UB Tech are all together. There's actually a building that blocks the view of most of that. It's a bank, an old bank that we own, Utah State University. And the removal of that bank building will identify, you'll see not only Utah State University's campus, but also the high school, which was recently completed and opened this fall, and UB Tech, which is building their new welding building. It's a gem that's missed from the highway right now, but signage would help identify the community's commitment to education and the partnerships.
And we photoshopped those signs in rather largely and would hope that you'd make them maybe larger with neon lights would be wonderful. But would leave that to you. But we appreciate all those who are behind us in the way of our commissioners and mayors and senators who've been behind our educational system here in the Uinta Basin. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, I have a question. With all those institutions so close together, do you have gridlock when events take place?
Well, fortunately, I can speak for Vernal. There's an underground tunnel that goes between the high school and both of our schools. And so it's wonderful. And so we have 200 or 300 high school students frequenting both of our university and the college on a daily basis. So we somewhat like gridlock from time to time because we're busy. It helps students get to our institutions. So.
I'll also mention that during the day we have the concurrent enrollment students at Utah State University, both in Roosevelt and Vernal. So our buildings are occupied teaching college courses to the high school students. And most of my students are non-traditional evening students. So our buildings get utilized throughout the day with that very little overlap. And so it's a nice mix, and I love having the high school students come to our concurrent classes in our building. They get a real true college university experience. The event part was the question, and to this date, I think it's great. There's very little gridlock, but a lot of collaboration and synergy between the two. We had a big event at Roosevelt, our campus there last night, an open house for the region, and the high school also had an event. And there's ample parking with the new high school, and any gridlock that used to exist has gone away by the new high school's parking. So.
What's the student enrollment combination out there?
Why don't you talk about yours?
On a good economic year where oil and gas is doing well, we've had upwards of 4,000 students in a year. Right now we're probably around 3,000 between 1,700 high school students and roughly that in our post-secondary students?
We have 500 degree-seeking students, so associate, bachelor's, master's, and PhDs in the basin. And then we have 350 high school students. So somewhere around 850 students at our university.
You know, it has great merit. We like to do a lot of public and private partnerships. So would Utah State be interested in partnering up with UDOT on this?
We'd have no problem doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, the old-fashioned way of saying that you got the money, we got the time.
Well, I don't see this as a large expense project as much as the signage and wayfinding. So
Well, no,
yeah.
besides that, just the coordination with the sign and placement
Sure.
and everything else. Carlos,
We'd be
you
happy to
want
help.
to add anything to that?
No, I appreciate Commissioner Holbrook's desire to find partners. We'll ask Rob Clayton, our Region 3 Director, to work with the schools on this. We do have, there's national standards for signage on national highway systems that we have to meet. So we'll see what we can do to help reach your goals.
I'm happy to do it even though you did your own.
just as a reference. So.
It's a easy text
we have
sign.
the
Utah
feds in
State
the
would do a better
room.
job.
We have the feds in the room. We can't do our signs
We can
however
always
we want.
use some good sign design.
Okay,
So.
great,
Yeah.
great. We'll be happy to help. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it very much. Anyone else would like to come forward, please?
Good morning, Quinn Benyon, Vernal City Manager. Good to spend some time with you yesterday on the tour. My comments are more of a compliment. I spent 20 years in city management in Kansas City area, and I can say my 1 year here, I've had more positive experiences with our state DOT than I did in my previous position. And really appreciate the coordination we have with Region 3 and the staffers there. And just wanted to thank you for that and look forward to some of our upcoming projects.
Thanks for the help on the tour too, Quinn.
Quinn, I have an idea for your fundraising for your terminal. This came to me 2 o'clock after midnight. When we were talking about the wild animals in the runway and the taxiway, forget about the prairie dog. Get that pink dinosaur next to the terminal. When the approaching airplane comes in, you're going to say, gentlemen or captain, please watch for the wild animals or the pink dinosaur. And let's see the reaction. And when the passenger get out, $10 a person, you're going to take a picture. So they will have the rest of their lives. And you got your terminal paid in 2 years. Anyway. Anyone else would like to talk to us and express the feelings of concerns for the community, county, city? Please.
Commissioner Brad Horricks, Uinta County. I just want to thank the UDOT for the working relationship that we have with them, their involvement. They come out regularly on meetings. We go over our concerns in the 3 different counties, and they have been tremendous. You know, I'm just a new commissioner. It's been set up previously before me, and you know, and it is tremendous what they do. Just for thoughts, or bring up that, you know, on you guys' Highway 88 going south of, in between Roosevelt and Vernal, there's a turns and goes to the south and goes to the little town of O'Ray. You guys' highway ends there, but we went to but just 2 miles past the Green River Bridge, we have a White River Bridge and project we got going. We went to the Federally Joint Highways Committee and got $2 million to replace a bridge there that was built in 1970. They never had the rating done on it. I know it's nothing to do with you guys, but just to inform you, you know, that this is what's happening. We got a 2 mile stretch of road in between the 2 rivers that needs to be raised, and it's a, you know, county road. We're going to be going to CIB for grants to try to get this road improved or upgraded at this time. And that's one of the major projects that we have as a county going on that ties right into you guys at the end of your highway there. And again, thank you for being here. Welcome. We appreciate all of you being here. we would really encourage to have any of you move out here and live, especially Larry. He's spending a lot of time out here. We need the economic boost of anybody that we can promote into coming out here and live and helps with our economy, especially the downturn in the oil and gas industry as it has been now. But thank you and welcome. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner? Question. As I recall, that road down there in O'Reilly you're talking about raising is flooded almost every spring.
Yeah.
How high do you anticipate it needs
Oh,
to be?
I've heard it's 2 foot.
2
you
foot.
know, with culverts and stuff up under them. We've had some estimates, I think, of about $4.3 million to do this 2-mile stretch of road. Trying to politic everybody that on the CIB board. This is where our oil and gas fields are. We don't have the money to make the payments on this. We're going to be applying for a full grant to raise this road, and we're going to be, we're going to be matching. We have a 7.5% match with the Joint Federal Highways Committee on this bridge. It's I think $2.1 million, and we're going to have some time in kind services and stuff that we're involved in. But it's we're going to have to raise that road 2 foot as estimations right now, and like I say, estimation of about $4.3 million for this little less than 2 miles of road that we have. We would be tickled if you guys wanted to adopt it as your highway and run it on out another couple of miles. We would help facilitate that if we could. But that's it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you again and welcome.
Thank you. Well, you do have a good support system in the CIB. Commissioner Horrocks, Commissioner Winterton is there every time, and he fights for it passionately. Thank you. Any more speakers? Okay, then we're going to move on to the next item, which is our federal highway partners, and I think Ivan is under the weather. You delegate talk. Oh, okay. Brigitte, bonjour.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Brigitte Mandel with Federal Highway. Thank you for having me this morning. I've got a few items for you. The first is on October 3rd, Federal Highway Administration published a notice of funding opportunity in the Federal Register for $300 million that is being made available for nationally significant federal lands and tribal projects. This is the first time under the FAST Act that this program's been funded, so it's a good opportunity. It's going to be projects that are geared towards access to federal lands or tribal lands, and the projects can be funded up to 90% through this program. Priority will be given to large-scale projects over $50 million, but they will accept projects that are $25 million or more. Applications are being accepted on a rolling basis with the first cutoff date of December 17th, 2018. Federal land management agencies and tribes can apply for the program directly. State and local agencies may also apply, but they need to be sponsored by a federal land management agency or tribe. The second item I have for you is on September 20th, Federal Highway published a Federal Register notice establishing a new special experimental project, SEP-16, to test and evaluate delegation of program level responsibilities for the Federal Highway Program. Under this special experimental program, states subject to Federal Highway approval may assume additional responsibilities, program level actions. These might include things like approval of design standards, noise policies, utility procedures, preventive maintenance programs, and some aspects of real property acquisition. If UDOT is interested, obviously the division is ready to help and answer any questions you might have. On October 1st, Federal Highway notified the states of their federal aid highway program apportionments for FY 2019. Nationally, over $42 billion has been, and the contract authority has been apportioned for FY 2019 This translates to just over $375 million for Utah. However, as you probably know, we're under a continuing resolution through December 7th. So on October 1st, or October 9th, I guess, it was, states were also notified of their obligation limitation. And so we were given 68 days of authority. So for Utah, just under $60 million is available to be spent. And that will be extended as we continue throughout the year, whether it be another continuing resolution or hopefully a full year bill. Also, Utah has not incurred any penalties this year. I don't know if you recall that there was a penalty issued last year. There were no penalties issued this year, so that was good. Yes. Lastly, the first audit report for UDOT's NEPA assignment program was, the final one was published in the Federal Register September 17th. The report concluded that UDOT has carried out the environmental responsibilities it assumed through the MOU, and that they were found in substantial compliance. So that was good news. That was our first audit. The second annual audit actually begins next week. So that's all I have for you today. Any questions?
Is substantial, what did you call it, substantial?
Substantially compliant.
Okay. Is
So
that
they
the top
were
score?
probably fully compliant.
Standard terminology.
Yeah, it just means, compliant, they did well. There were a few items for recommendations. There's always best practices that could be implemented, things like that. But overall, it was a very good report. And I believe one of the quickest issued for the NEPA assignment state, so.
I don't think I've ever heard an audit say very good.
No.
They gotta find something, right? That's their job, right?
Any other questions from Brigitte?
Any audit.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ivan, get well. Next month you're up, okay?
Next month you got me.
Now bring your checkbook, please. Next item is the Utah scoreboard. Let's see, Randy Park is going to be the first. What happened to Jason? Jason, I've already... Welcome back. We missed you, Jason.
I canceled some things I was doing today to come here and spend time with you, but Robert.
Oh, okay then. But we missed you last month. Just remember that.
I'm fine here today.
Okay.
All right, Heather, I can drive, so. Well, there's not a ton that's changed since the last presentation, but a couple things I want to touch on. Over here you can see we've got 8 past due projects. And 7 of those projects are fairly small, less than $1 million. And a lot of them are local government projects. We do have one project though that was supposed to advertise in August on SR10. It's a bridge project. It's going to advertise in November. And I believe it's 13 million. But if you want to see that information on what those projects are and dig deeper, you can go down below this chart here, the advertising status, and click on this past due. And the website's a little slow, so I won't do that here, but it'll list all of that information. You can find out whatever you want to know about any of those projects that are advertised late or past due, or projects that are going to advertise in the next 60 days. So you can see we've got 22 projects to advertise within the next 60 days, and I kind of anticipate that's going to go up a little bit based on some conversations we're having on some preservation work we're going to do. We've advertised. These are all the projects we've advertised since over the last month, and so you can see everybody's been really busy. There's $136 million worth of projects there that have been advertised over the last month. This is a big time of year for us to be advertising. We like October, November, December to ramp up and get this on our contractor schedules. This advertising status, you can see those projects that are either late, that have been late in red or unadvertised in black. The light blue shows projects that will be advertised in the future. And then the purple are projects that we're still scoping. So those usually roll out and will turn light blue here shortly, the ones that are coming up in the next few months. You can see we've got quite a big load to advertise here over the next few months, and then it really dies down when we get to May and the summer time.
Our project, we've got out of the 176 projects we've got going right now, we're about $1.3 billion in our construction program that the regions in Central are managing. Our contractor payments by month are down a little bit this month, and I suspect they're going to stay down a little bit because of the weather that we've had, and so our contractors haven't been as busy, although the weather cranks up, maybe we'll get to that point where we were somewhere around $80 million last month we paid out to our contractors. This chart I purposely messed up and didn't fix or didn't get fixed because it shows we're doing really good. And we're not doing that good, I'm pretty sure, and I apologize for not getting that taken care of. This contract award versus engineer's estimate, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on this. We chatted a few months ago about our concern with prices going up, cost escalation, and so we've done some high-level work. And the sky's definitely not falling. It's not near as big a problem as we thought we had. We think we've got a handful of projects as we come through this first of the year. We may have to do a little bit of adjustment, but by all means, for the most part, we had money in those projects, and costs didn't go up as anticipated near as much what we thought. And so that's where we've ended up on our cost estimates, and so we'll continue to watch that over time. That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
What kind of contingencies UDOT usually puts in the project when they're estimating?
Well, we used to just put in a 10 or 15 or 20% contingency. It's kind of a national standard of how people do it now. We do cost-based estimating, and so we really put money in different items based on what we think will escalate. So every project's different based on, if it's a bridge and there's a lot of steel, we may put some escalation money, we may put some contingency money in that steel based on what we're seeing happen in the market. Mm-hmm. Roadway excavation, things are taking a lot of energy, those kind of things. Right now we're seeing labor. Labor is really tough to find anybody, and so maybe the labor components will add, but we don't just add 10%, we usually put it in items.
Any questions for Randy? Thank you. Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up on that question. We do, like Randy said, it's not a specific number every single time, but there is contingency at every single project that we bid. Sometimes that gets eaten up at award, sometimes that gets eaten up throughout the project, and sometimes it never gets eaten up, and then we find ourselves at a commission meeting in the future moving money off of a project to put it back in the program because we just didn't use that contingency. So the number one reason why you see money coming back is because we don't eat into that contingency during this meeting. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Number one reason is we didn't need it, and the other one is we get good bids. Okay. And Bill in the past, and now Ivan comes and takes care of that.
Okay. So, thank you, Randy.
Okay, thank you.
Good job. Okay, Robert.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
It's good to be here with you today. We're going to look at our zero fatalities dashboard. I need to shut this down real quick. There we go. I need to provide a grain of salt this morning. We've had a little disagreement with a sister agency on data, and we're still getting it tied up. But these numbers are accurate as of Wednesday morning. We're reestablishing our data feed with DTS, and I've got some other numbers I can update you from there on. We're running around 91.5 on our matrix, our safety metric, which is a combined measure of the number of fatalities we've had on our roadways, number of serious injuries we've had on our roadways, number of crashes, number of UDOT employee fatalities, number of UDOT employee injuries, and number of UDOT equivalents. You see that's a little drop from last time when we spoke. Part of that comes in our fatalities, and I'll explain that here, and then we'll go into more accurate numbers. As you can see, on Wednesday, we had dropped below, or as of Wednesday, we were below our goal. We did not meet our goal for fatality reductions for this year. The fatality rate is outpaced our reduction goal. We were at 218. As of yesterday morning, we were at 221 fatalities on our roadways this year.
So
Rob, explain how you set the goal to the reduction of the
You
three-year
bet.
rolling.
You bet. On our goal, we take the average of the last 3 years, and we're shooting for a 2.5% reduction off of that. You know, that's a documentable goal. It's something we can measure each year to give us a step towards 0 fatalities. But that's how these goals are set. And that same method applies to all of our traffic crash and serious injury goals as well. It's a 3-year average, and a 2.5% reduction on that is 100% of the goal for that year. So it's a goal based on progress. Okay. On serious injuries, we're at 557, and our goal was 713. And crashes, we're at 26,000, and our goal was 29, almost 30,000 there. So those numbers are showing improvements, are showing that we're achieving those goals, but our fatalities have slipped above the number we were shooting for. On our employee injuries, we are currently running 3.4 injuries per 200,000 hours worked, and our reduction goal for that is 3.52, so we're running ahead of that goal as well. We're looking at a reduction again this year. And our equipment rate, we're at 8.75, and our goal was 6.85, so we still have some work to do on that this year. When we met last month, we talked about motorcycle fatalities as one of our big concerns. That still is a concern. We're still at a high for this year, but in the past month we haven't had that rate increase. They've come down just a little bit. We're now projecting about 50 motorcycle fatalities throughout the year. We're currently at 44. I'm hopeful that we're going to be below that 50 based on what I'm looking at in the years we've had, for the numbers we've had in October, November, and December in the past years. Last month we did have kind of a high month on pedestrian fatalities. We had 8 pedestrian fatalities, and so we'll continue to work on that, continue to look for improvements in there. We did have some numbers come out from NHTSA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Agency. The 2017 BMT rate fatality numbers came out, and nationwide it was 1.16, which is a 2.5% decrease from 2016. Our 2017 numbers were 0.87, so we're significantly below the national average, and we're running about 0.87, 0.86 right now this year to date, so we expect to be down in that range again. Okay. Do you guys have any questions for me? Yes, Commissioner Law.
So talking about the equipment damage
Yes.
rate, the one that apparently there's some work to do on, does that maybe coincide with what Randy mentioned about labor issues? Are we too having trouble getting the right labor force to use our equipment?
That's a great question. I don't have a report of exactly which employees or which units are causing those, and whether or not they're newer or staffed by a higher proportion of newer employees. What I can say though is that our new employee orientation program is stronger than it has been in the past. When I was a district engineer, the new employees that were coming in, we were rushing them into the field much quicker than we are today. We're taking more time to get them trained, and I think that's going to make a difference for us. I think we see that in our employee injury rates, but we still have work to do on that equipment damage. So.
Robert? So Chris, maybe our employee safety manager, he tracks all those different data points of who's doing at what age, how many years of experience, which region, everything, and which maintenance stations are experiencing the largest increment damage rates. And then we try to address that, but right now it's pretty spread out. So there's no hot.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from
Just wanted
Robert? Go ahead.
This progress, I think, is even more positive given the fact that we do have the fastest population growth in America. So I think that's something that has to be taken into account, which means more young people and more dumb young motorcyclists on the streets.
Well, we want everybody to live, but thank you, Commissioner. We're working hard on it, and we'll continue to work on that. Thank you, though.
Well, I sure appreciate it. It's just, it's still tough on these roads when you see those motorcyclists without helmets weaving in and out. It's an education challenge for us all.
But it's everybody's responsibility, right?
It is.
It's all of our behaviors that are causing these concerns. So,
Thank you, Robert.
Okay.
Thanks for
Thank
what
you.
do.
Good presentation. Okay, item number 6 on the agenda is Uinta Basin Rail Project, and our friend Mark McKee is going to be presenting from Seven County Infrastructure Coalition. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. And it's a great opportunity to be here this morning. I would, let's see, I've got to get my glasses on here so I can see the right key to press here. I'd like to talk a little bit about the rail project and a little bit of background behind this before we do this. As you all came in, and you've all seen this many times, but as you look and all the work that you've done, and appreciation again to Senator Van Tassel for all the help he's given us, but all that truck traffic on the road, the amount of oil going out to our refineries out in Salt Lake City. And the refineries out there, they process about 185,000 barrels a day. Of that, they process, and it's going to range between 70 and 90,000 barrels a day of Uinta Basin crude. And that's pretty much a maximum amount with air quality issues, everything that's there. That's about the maximum that's going to happen for our Uinta Basin crude. And so, particularly give Duchesne and Carbon counties credit for this to begin with. They began a pipeline study, and in this study evaluated looking at a pipeline to be able to solve some of these issues. With our oil, it is an outstanding oil. The oil has a very good, what they call API gravity. It's very good as it relates to what they call Western Texas Intermediate. It's a very good oil. It's very low in sulfur and minerals, so it's low on pollutants. But it does have one disadvantage, and that's the fact that it has a high pour point, meaning that it takes about 115 to 120 degrees to make it a liquid. Other than that, it's like a candle. And so if it can set up, and that's the one challenge we have with this oil. Next slide here. Well, before I go to that, UDOT, as you might remember, was involved in a study. The legislature funded, I believe it was a couple $1 million, another $1 million was found, and I believe it was around $3 million that went into a study in 2012, 2013, 2014, evaluating rail and looking at how we might address the issues. And in that study, 26 different routes were evaluated. If you kind of look on the right side there, the Colorado line, these routes also went into Colorado. Ultimately, what was looked at the strongest was a route that would go up Indian Canyon. It was determined that that would be about a $6 billion project. And so that the project came to an end. The study ended. There was some funding, I believe, that had been allocated, had been left over and redirected to other projects. This slide here just demonstrates the national rail network. This green line that is shown on there shows a representation of maybe a different route that would be much less expensive and would be viable and feasible, and I'll talk about that as we move along in this presentation. Under this same UDOT study that we just referenced, HDR was contracted by UDOT to perform this study. Economists were involved. And a lower line on the bottom, a mid line that's red, and an upper line that's green. On the lower projections, it showed that if these transportation constraints were not addressed, that we would lose an average of $1 billion a year if we didn't address those transportation constraints. And another thing that came from this study that's quite interesting, we're all familiar with the initiative that the legislature and the governor's been involved in trying to create these jobs, but it talks about this annual production of $1 billion and what it means. Again, this comes from UDOT, but I'd take note at the very bottom there, it says creation of nearly 27,000 jobs if we address these transportation constraints. I'm going to talk a little bit now just about the discount at the refineries out in Salt Lake. What we did is we took the posted prices, we looked at WTI prices, which is Western Texas Intermediate. We looked at what do the refineries pay in Salt Lake. Over the past decade, it's been an average of about a 17.5% discount off of WTI. If we could get WTI pricing, this is showing over the last decade the amount of royalty and taxes that would have come into the state of Utah and its entities of $663 million, 563 to the local bodies. And then what does that mean as far as revenues lost to the companies and others? And this is based on posted price. It's a little over $3 billion in the last decade. So what we've looked at has been, if we were able to build this rail, we've commissioned two different entities that's done studies. This rail has been studied. It's time to do something. And but in the studies, essentially what we've looked at here, interviews have been conducted with the industry, and under the low range, they believe that production would increase to 225,000 barrels a day. The high range about 400,000, with the mid range around 300,000. On this low range, over the next decade, there'd be $3.2 billion in additional taxes and royalties coming to the state. That is a tremendous investment and opportunity that we would receive by moving forward with this project. And I just bring this slide just to let you look at what is the forecast as it relates to oil and the need for oil. We know that there's a lot of electric cars, a lot of different kinds of ideas that's out there. This slide comes from EIA, which is the group that forecasts energy for the United States. But essentially on the international outlook on oil, you can see that it continues to grow, at least going clear out to 2040 with a upward trend continuing. What about prices? Again, this was done in 2015, but showing an 86% increases on WTI prices. Some of that has already been achieved. What about the volume of resource out here in the Uinta Basin? How much resource do we have here? If you look at this slide here where you see Uinta, and this is compared to the best plays in the United States, it compares very favorably with the very best plays in the United States with the volume of oil. This is showing 55 billion barrels of oil in place. Also in the blue on the bottom there where you see 20 to 60 million barrels per section. Tremendous amount of oil. HDR also looked at this to see the volumes, and they estimated between 56 and 312 billion barrels of oil in place in the Uinta Basin. Just to put that into reference, Saudi Arabia is known as the oil mega of the world. They estimate 200 billion, just to kind of give, and this doesn't even get into oil shale and oil sands and the other forms of resource we have here. I have several clips here that I'd like to just touch base on here. This is Chris Sutton, and these are a few clips that I would just touch base with. He is with Crescent Point.
This year we plan to put around $300 million to work in the basin. That's around 20% of the corporate budget. Oil place available in the basin is really large, between 40 and 60 million barrels of oil in place per section. Calculated across the entire basin, we believe there are 55 billion barrels of oil in place. Year over year, horizontal productivity is increasing. This is a cumulative oil versus
You know what? I'm going to not do these clips just because for some reason it works fine, but it's not working fine with this system. So I'm going to bypass the clips, but we have clips from Crescent Point, from Newfield, from Axia, and leadership of their companies. But essentially what they're saying is there's a lot of oil, there's a lot of resource here, and they talk about the challenges we have here. They've talked about the need for infrastructure, and how important that would be. I'm going to see if I can get this.
It's interesting.
This here he talks about there's tens of thousands of wells that need to be drilled, ought to be drilled, and what economic value that is.
Look it up.
I'm going to just finish. Many of you will know Rulon Gill, who is the chairman of the oil Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, State of Utah. Let's see if this video clip will work here.
The Uinta Basin takes the normal market price and reduces it about 20% because we only have one market. They call that the Uinta Basin differential. So if the price today were $65, you'd pay basically $13 off of that at the wellhead, and that's what you get. So by having another market, the potential is to do away with that Uinta Basin differential and get the full $65. Would anyone like to comment on that? Do you understand the question?
I can't comment on specific production numbers, but I can comment on the fact that, you know, we have shareholders that obviously they want us to invest our money in the most competitive plays that we have right now, which I mentioned before, are Stack and Scoop. But if we were getting full WTI plus the Uinta Basin would definitely compete with those type economics, if not exceed that.
WTI is West Texas Intermediate. Okay,
Yeah, no, look, I think basin production again could be 300,000-400,000 in a 5-year time frame with that kind of prices.
So just to put that in perspective, again, today there's around 80,000 barrels a day. That's pretty well maxed out to what it's going to be. The idea of building this rail is there is a great desire among industry to be able to increase that production and to be able to get this to outside markets. So I want to do this one last little video clip, and then I've got a little narrative after that. So.
I have a comment by me as a regulator and a former oil and gas guy. For us, it looks like the game is state versus state for capital allocation. And the key is to have an environment, both in transportation, regulation, predictability, that can lend itself to your companies giving an allocation to Utah. A few years ago, we were getting peanuts, and now we're getting, what percentage we're getting of your capital allocation, each of you?
It's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15%, wasn't it?
We're all in. We're 100%. We're like, what else do you want?
I love it when you talk dirty.
And about 20% for us.
And all of that could go up with the doing away with the Uinta Basin differential and the increase in transportation to alternative markets.
Definitely. It impacts oil economics very significantly.
And I didn't take time with all this. I'm not sure why that first video clip the sound wasn't going right, but again, here we had Matt Twilley from Newfield, Adam Sayers, president of Axia, Chris Sutton from Crescent Point, and many other industry leaders as we've had the opportunity to do these interviews. But I'd like to talk about these studies that we performed in. We had HDR did a study. There was the UDOT study. There was a 2001 study. This has been studied. It is economical. It's feasible. The cost of this project is estimated to be about $1.4 billion to be able to take the product to these other areas. The economics came in better than what was anticipated. And so the idea that we have as we would move forward with this is we will be before the Community Impact Board in Moab on November 8th. We will be seeking $27.9 million phased out over a couple of years for funding that would do everything to get us to the regulatory approval and then to finance the rail. The government entities are, as the coalition is, we're eligible to be able to receive these RIF funds. We've had an opportunity to visit with the federal group on this item through the RIF program. The interest rate is a very attractive interest rate in as much as it would be the federal borrowing rate, which today is about 3.7. But because we are rural, we would qualify for half the borrowing rate, which would put us about 1.7% to be able to do that. So this is not exact routes, but this will show on the very western end would be over in the Mighton Bench area, and there's several different routes that are contemplated that would be utilized. That's kind of the bigger picture. One going over on the very east end, on the upper end, goes over to Craig, and then there's two loops going down to Rifle. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. This is more in the Utah side. As we did the economic analysis, we did it going a longer route that goes up around, does not go through tribal land. That southern route goes through tribal land. We have had some very productive discussions with the Ute tribe and actually have a meeting with them again this next week. And I believe this would be a great project for all of us together.
Mike, how long are we talking? Miles, roughly?
Depending on the route, but 150 plus miles. Yeah.
Ballpark, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking. One of the things that we also contemplated in the study was we asked them to look at, as we contemplated all this truck traffic that is on Highway 40, what if the oil got on the rail, went to Rifle, turned around, went back to Salt Lake? What would the rates on that be? And how would that compare to trucking? And so again, with our oil pipeline study, what we found was a few years ago it was a little higher than this, but during the time of that study, the truck traffic was about $5 a barrel to get the oil to Salt Lake City. What we looked at here was, in doing that, if we had those higher numbers of volume, it would be about $5.26 a barrel. If we had the lower numbers, it would be about $6.16 a barrel. One of the things that we have contemplated has been, go to this next slide, whoops, has been possibly, let's see, this next slide might demonstrate this. If you look at the Colorado line and you see that blue point that kind of dips up, and then if you looked at the very western end of that green line, somewhat of a line going between there, that would be Mac, Colorado. Obviously that would save quite a bit of freight costs as well, and potentially if we were to do that, it's possible that freight would even be cheaper than putting it on the trucks going on Highway 40. So I appreciate having the opportunity to visit with Carlos. What's this been, Carlos? About a month ago, something like that, and I appreciate the invitation to be able to come here and present today. One of the things that I had asked about was, and I know this isn't on an agenda, so it would have to be a future consideration, but this is what I wanted to put I guess a plug in here today if I could. As I mentioned, we will be before the Community Impact Board seeking a total of $27.9 million. One of the things that would be very helpful to move this project along is if UDOT is supportive to this project. Obviously, this is a project that UDOT was involved with a few years ago. There was nearly $3 million spent. I don't know how much was left, but wanted to see, even if it was a small amount, if UDOT would be willing to contribute a small amount of funding toward this project to help in this planning stage. We believe that this project is very viable. We believe this project will happen. The key for this project to happen actually is with the CIB. And we're going to need all the help we can. And one of the things that I've heard from some of the CIB board members has been, it would be nice if there's some other partners that's willing to contribute to help with that. And so what I would hope would be possibly in a future meeting, if this could be something that would be considered to, even a small amount would be, I think the message would be valuable. And thank you for the time.
Yeah. Questions from Mike? Go ahead.
Mike, has there been any consideration for this rail moving any other items of freight besides oil?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. In that study, yes, what has been looked at and contemplated, and a number of interviews have happened. There's a lot of frac sand that comes in, so there'd be inbound, outbound, but a lot of the frac sands, to drill one horizontal well today takes a unit train of sand to do one horizontal well. These horizontal wells, technology has changed. I guess if I can just for a minute, technology has changed so much over the last several years. They used to go vertical, and they would go down. Now because in the Uinta Basin, it's not like we have one zone. There are a number of zones. It's called, this stacked. So as they go down, there's all these different formations, and they're catching that all the way, and then they're taking these, and they're going like this, so they go down like this up to 2 miles. And so there's a lot less environmental impacts. And some of you might remember a few years ago, there was a well down in Sevier County that came in at 1,000 barrels a day. And, everybody was just ecstatic. Wow, look at that well. Unfortunately, it kind of just, it was a quick flash, and then it was kind of gone. These wells, and there's kind of a curve, kind of a steep curve of drop off on these wells, but after a year with no pumping, these wells that's done with this new technology are still over 1,000 barrels a day. And a few years ago when I was a commissioner, we had 50 wells drilling in the Uinta Basin. There are 5 wells. They're all oil wells. Some of those were gas then. 5 wells drilling. And today we have around 80,000 barrels a day that's being produced. They're actually having to choke this back right now because there's only so much market in Salt Lake City. There's some of this is going over the hill down into Price trying to find a market, and it's not an efficient way to be able to do this. And so there is a great need to it. And thank you for the question.
I have a question, Mike. You referred to UDOT study a few years ago. If they proved that feasibility was not there, so what has changed that you think that you can do or the coalition can do this time?
Thank you. Very good question. When UDOT did the study, their initial project wasn't anything to do with feasibility. As they did the project, they analyzed routes, they analyzed all these different methods. And during the process, as we were involved with that, the 7 county, Uinta and Duchesne counties were involved with that, we said it has to project out. And it was quite a ways into the study that feasibility component happened. The issue that made it non-feasible that time was the numbers that came back was that it would take $6 billion to build the rail. That's what knocked it out. This project today is estimated $1.4 billion, very different numbers. And there's tunneling, there was all kinds of things that would have been required because the route at that time that was being reviewed and looked at was going up Indian Canyon. With rail, you need to be, generally they suggest to be within a 2% slope. I guess they can go up to 3%, but the general feel is to keep it within a 2% slope.
Who will be the owner of the rail or the operator of the rail eventually?
It's anticipated that the 7 county coalition would be the owner of the rail, and a short line operator would be contracted to operate the rail.
And you have their consent to connect to their line?
We have had, yes, we have had discussions with UP. Thank you, another really good question. One of the things that's really important with this rail is there are 2 main rail Class 1 carriers in our area, in this western area, Union Pacific and Burlington Northern. We've had good dialogue, good discussions with both entities, continuing to have dialogue on there. So the idea, if we go to Rifle, the advantage of going to Rifle is the fact that you have 2 Class 1 carriers there, and you have a competitive, with rail, you really want to have competition. When we get to Craig, we only have 1 rail carrier, which is Union Pacific. And so there's a tremendous rate advantage of being in an area where you have 2 Class 1 carriers. And that was also contemplated in the UDOT study, as Carlos well remembers, yeah.
Michael, thank you. This is an excellent presentation. What kind of truck traffic would this take off of US 40, which is one of our major concerns, of course?
Well, and this goes down to the economics of this. One thing that I didn't mention here, if we're able to look at MAC, you know, we'll have to prove this yet because we need a little bit more in the study, but as I demonstrated in this, according to R.L. Banks, and this is the work they do, they just do railroad studies, they showed $5.26 on that upper volume, $6.19 on the lower. It's a little bit more than what they're currently paying, the companies are paying to get the truck traffic solid. One of the things we contemplate that we would like to do in this study is we would like to look at a third alternative, which you do in NEPA anyway. In NEPA, you evaluate various alternatives. We did the best we could with the budget we had, but we would like to evaluate that, and it wouldn't take a lot, but to look at that MAC Colorado, because that is so much closer. And I believe the possibility exists that it will actually be cheaper, could be cheaper than the truck traffic is, because you're cutting off quite a bit of freight. And again, the more trains, the more carloads we put on this line, the more competitive those rates become. Mm-hmm. And so I can't really answer today what that is, but again, this is the value of UDOT contributing to this study so we can answer that question.
Mm-hmm. That study being done, Mike, sounds like to me then that if that was done and it's actually a railroad build,
yes,
what would that do to the population explosion in the Uinta Basin and creating other jobs and put traffic back on Highway 40?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt, and that is a really good question. I don't think there's any doubt with a rail coming in here that will have a pretty strong economic aspect. UDOT study that funded showed 27,000 jobs total. They wouldn't all be in the basin, but it does show a lot of new jobs.
Thank you.
I may be confused because I'm newer to this. So we've already paid for a study, and you're asking for us to help pay for another study?
So yes, you did. The legislature authorized, I think it was a couple $1 million. Was that right, Carlos? And then with some other funding was found. So that particular study was mostly done on route analysis, and the majority of that study focused on going over 9 Mile Canyon. And so when that came in at that $6 billion, what happened is that was too expensive, and everybody just said, you know, didn't look like it was viable. What happened since then, we dusted off, we looked at, we reviewed, we thought, are there better alternatives? Is there a better way of doing that? And again, by going over to Colorado, going that route, the terrain is better, the slopes are better, the costs were so much less, which makes this a viable project.
So, did we do rail?
Well, that's a technical question.
Okay. So, just for a point of clarification,
Sure.
so the legislature funded this, but the legislature has to fund the money through someplace. So they put that funding through here. So it's not really what we do. We were the vehicle to help facilitate a legislative function.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Okay, but rail is not what we're tasked with.
The legislature handed it off to us.
Okay, that's
we did not ask for it.
That's right. So, and let me just touch base on this for a minute, because you know, the bottom line is, who does do rail? The possibility exists for one of your major carriers like Union Pacific or BN to come in and do it. They're not going to do it. They don't. That's usually what short lines do. The length of this project would be the largest project for a rail project built in the United States for some years. And I think there'll be many that would tell you this is the most underserved area in the United States in relation to rail. And what's the reason for that is because we are in a basin, and it has been challenging. And so, you know, we're not looking for funding to build the rail. We're not looking for that, but if there could be even a small contribution to help with that study. And as I mentioned, there were some funds that had been there that were redirected because at the end we pulled the plug on the project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Presentation.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we have a special presentation that I would like to now turn over the microphone to Carlos, please.
Would it be okay if I go
Please, go ahead.
I'd like to ask Senator Van Tassel to join me. He loves this. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, members of the commission. I'm Carlos Braceras with UDOT. That's why I usually introduce myself to you, isn't it?
Heard that a time.
I wanted to take this opportunity in the home of Senator Van Tassel to, first of all, I wanted to recognize him, I wanted to thank him, I wanted to embarrass him a little bit, just about how much he's meant to transportation in the state of Utah and to this Department of Transportation. He's had a very distinguished legislative career in the legislature, and I'm going to just, I don't want to mess up that computer here. I'm going to read some of his committees that he served on here, because over his 12 years, I asked him how many trips he's made from the base, and he has no idea, but 750,000 miles? Yeah. He served on nearly every committee or subcommittee that's been related to transportation. He's chair from 2011 to 2014 of the Senate Transportation, Public Utilities, Energy, and Technology Standing Committee, on which he served since 2007. He's been the chair of the Transportation Interim Committee going from 2009 to 2014. Vice chair multiple times of the Executive Appropriations Committee, which is really the folks that make those decisions of where the money goes. Infrastructure and General Government Appropriations Subcommittee from 2011 to 2016. This is the committee that we go to and report to in terms of how we spend the public's dollars and talk about the needs that are there. The Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee co-chair from 2009 to 2010. Transportation and Public Utilities Technology Committee multiple times. You know, Senator Van Tassel has stood out to me. I've had an opportunity. I've been working with the legislature now in my almost 33 years at UDOT. I've had over 18 years of working with the legislature. And legislators stand out for different reasons. And Senator Van Tassel has stood out to me always as somebody who had a principle and believed in what the right thing is to do. And he would always look to do the right thing at the right time in the right way. And I use the term that he was one of the bravest politicians I've ever met, because he believed that it was important to do the right thing for the right reason. When this department, together with the Transportation Commission, made a decision years ago that when we didn't have enough money to fund all of our roads in a proactive way, we created a subclass of roads. We called them level 2 roads. And there was thousands of centerline miles in the state of Utah where we just did not proactively treat those roadways. We reacted. We filled potholes. And he let me know when we had a few potholes out there. But we would fill potholes. And you know, from a fiscal responsibility perspective, we were able to treat our high priority roads, the ones that were getting all the trucks, all of the traffic, in a very cost-effective way. But we were starting to lose the condition on these level 2 roads, these lower volume roads. And every year we'd come to the legislature, we'd report the pavement condition, and we'd project the pavement condition for these roads in the future with the amount of money, the $10 million a year that we spend filling potholes, reacting to it. And he became very, very concerned about this and wanted to do something about it. So he was one of the first ones at the legislature to start to say, we need to find more money for pavement preservation. And he became a champion for trying to find a way to do that. And you know, it's not really something that politicians like to brag about, that they worked to raise the gas tax. And in fact, when the legislature did pass it in 2015, I got a call from the Wall Street Journal, and they wanted to do a little interview. And the question they asked that I still remember to this day is, I thought Utah was a very red state, a conservative state. I said, exactly, because we believe in fiscal responsibility. Keeping good roads in good shape costs less. You pass on less financial liability to the future generations. And it was that thinking ahead of what's important to not only the people today in Utah, but to our children and their children, is what he really believed in. So I wanted to take a chance to say thank you, Senator, for not only your bold leadership and conviction, but also in the way you've been so accessible to, to be able to sit down with a legislator in their office. And by the way, he has a UDOT construction hat in his office. We don't have fancy stuff for legislators, but he proudly wore it on a very cold evening in the rain when he wants us to move a bridge down in Utah County. But to be able to sit down with a legislator and to talk through complex issues in a way and take the time to listen and to understand, I'd like to say that's always the case. And it's not always, but a lot of times it's an elevator speech, and you're trying to convey a complex subject. The senator always was accessible and gave us the time to explain it. It wasn't always a yes, but that was because he believed in what he believed in, and he would stand up for it. So Senator, I wanted to say thank you. We've got a few things here. I'll leave the most important one here for last. You can't go anywhere without a plaque, right? That's what we do in our business. And so this is a plaque from UDOT to Kevin Van Tassel in recognition of your exceptional leadership and service to transportation in the Senate. So this is what we would like to present to you, Senator.
Oh, thank you.
Now, this is what I consider to be the most important, that maybe I hope you keep, whether either on your head or on a shelf somewhere. But this is a hat. This is the next edition of a hat that we hand out. The commissioners, you received one a couple years ago, and it's a hat that we'll hand out to employees as we have an opportunity to get out and meet with our employees and talk about, and thanking them for what they do. So it's the thing on here. It says "Bleeding Orange." And that's kind of our internal motto about the UDOT employees, because the passion that they have for what they do, they bleed orange. And so, Senator, there's not too many non-UDOT employees that have one of these hats, and so I was hoping you would take that, and hopefully, okay, there we go. Now I want a picture with him with that on. And I got two other things here. Maybe you can stick this on your hard hat, but when an employee does something that's exceptional at UDOT, we don't really have a lot of tools to give them financial recognition, so we award them the silver barrel. And so we think construction is progress, and so I know some of our citizens might not like to see a silver construction barrel out there, but for us it represents progress for the state of Utah. So this is the silver barrel. And then they like to stick it on their hard hats. So, it's like in the oil fields, when I did work in the oil field years ago, the hard hats would always have stickers of the different companies of the rigs that you worked on. It was kind of a badge of your seniority. And so our employees work to get those silver barrels on their hard hats to have that recognition that they've done good things multiple times.
Well,
so
thank you,
Senator.
Appreciate you, Doc. Carlos is absolutely right. As we moved, I remember when John Norda announced that we were creating a Class 2 road, and I looked at that map and I said, that's going to kill rural Utah. And, and I understood why we did it. I mean, we've got to take care of our main arteries. We've got to take care of all of those issues that are important to the state of Utah. We are a transportation state, whether we want to admit it or not. Rail is limited. We got areas that we do, but an I-15 is very important, even though you can't get down it now, even though we thought we were overbuilt. But for rural Utah, Highway 208 or 87 or whatever, for those of us that need to travel that, it's important. And it didn't take me long after a year or two watching that and seeing that I came to realize that we're going to lose these roads and there's not going to be money to replace them.
And that's when I started working on trying to increase the gasoline tax. And it's not popular. It is. There's still people that cuss me and hate me. I hate to tell them that there's more coming, but anyway, that's I won't have to battle that. But since 2015, and as I see the projects that you are authorizing and putting, and as I traveled, I went to Richfield Wednesday down to a meeting and came back, Highway 10 and over. We have done a lot of great work with that additional money. And Carlos's commitment, and I think the commission, is that they were going to take that money and bring our rural roads up. And I think the last graph we've seen a significant increase in those. I've seen it locally on the highways that we've done. I feel a lot better about the security of our infrastructure in our rural areas as we deal with these 2-lane roads. And that's something that I think we just had to do. And I'd much rather have my program in the long term, but anyway, we got something. And that happens in industry and in politics. You have to be able to cut those. Whatever you do, you got to work the middle ground and make sure that we're making improvements and getting things done. So I appreciate all of the projects. I told Carlos this morning, I said I sat down and counted this morning, and it's a lot safer trip to Salt Lake City than it was 12 years ago. We have a lot more. I won't kill myself anymore going down Daniels. I don't have to cross the double yellow line to pass the truck that's doing what it should do going down there slow. And we moved through, and the projects that's been done on 40 have been a significant impact to this community. If we hadn't done any of those, I think our death toll on the highway would have been significantly higher. We have some great projects coming up that's going to do it, to make a big difference and kind of finish the 2040 vision that we started on several years ago. So thank you for the commission. Thank you, Carlos and UDOT. I'd like to just take a second and talk about some of my concerns for the Uinta Basin in the future. Some of you, one thing that you have when you have a lot of gray hair and you've been around a while, you kind of remember the past. And in the late 1980s, there at one time in this community, there was over 850 homes listed for sale in the multiple listing of the real estate. And that didn't count the 200 or 300 that the banks were holding on their inventories. We were selling homes that were built brand new for $70,000 to $80,000, and that doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but back then that was kind of what a lot of the homes that were being built. The financial institutions and the property owners were selling those for $15,000 to $20,000. There was no economy. We were in a position where we were just wondering who was going to shut out the lights as we left the area. And part of that is because oil prices collapsed, there was no market, and the companies that were investing and developing the resources, capital is a coward. It just doesn't go where, it goes the path of least resistance. And it just continues to do that. And we're in that position today. We have a resource in the state of Utah that would be envied if we had a way to export it out. And so there's a number of us that are still looking on. When I announced that I wasn't going to run for Senate again, I figured this was a glide path, and I was going to do fishing, I was going to go to kids' football games, and I was going to do all of this stuff. But it is so critical right now that we address some of these things and get some understanding and some positions. If we don't succeed on a few things, we could be in the 1980s again here in the Uinta Basin. Not because we don't have resource, not because we don't understand the field, not because the state doesn't need the taxes, but we're going to lose because in the boardroom, they're going to be asking the questions. We have $500 million to invest. Where are we going to invest that at? Well, if we keep it in the Uinta Basin, we'll make 10%. If I move it to North Dakota or to the All the other plays that are there, they'll make 250%. Now, as board members, where will you make your decision? It's not, they don't like us, but their shareholders and their stockholders are wanting return. And technology has changed so much that we used to have 15, 16, 18 rigs at one time, maybe up to 20. But now one well will replace and do as much as 8 to 10 of the old wells. And so we don't have, you used to be able to say, all right, if we have 10 rigs working, that's going to filter down to 80 jobs or whatever it is. But that's not the case anymore. We don't have those. We don't have as many servicing, but they make more money. And we have less surface destruction and things. We can harvest 2 full sections of oil now from one location and get more oil than we ever have in the past. The only thing that's restraining us is the ability to move it. And there's hard to say, I'm not sure what all those are, but if we can't give some incentives to the companies to continue to invest, the state of Utah and the Uinta Basin is going to be suffering as bad as we were in the 1980s. And I hate to say that, but it's just, I'm also a banker, and I also understand what board of directors do and how they have to return things. So that's an issue. I'm working with a little group, and I'm probably gonna rope Carlos in on a little meeting and talk about a few things. But these are critical issues for the state of Utah. And I know that we've spent over $50 million this year in fighting forest fires, which is gonna take a drain. But if we had another $300 million in revenue coming in, that would be a whole lot easier to take care of. And so there's some things that we're working on, we're trying to get done. I think that Utah has a bright future. We're the most diversified economy in the United States. And our problem is we want to be diversified, but you have to use your key issue, your key element, and that's one of the issues that we're doing. We are now setting the record. One of the issues, when I started in the Senate 12 years ago, we had a tremendous play in natural gas going on just south of town. And we were drilling a lot of wells. And the whole purpose of that was the new market that was going to be filled was going to fill those pipelines. And we were going to provide natural gas to New York and to Chicago and all of those areas. Well, the things that's changed with the technologies, they're now wanting to export gas out to us. And so we got to find a new market, and that market is there. And there are some issues that are going on. There's a group that is looking at putting a liquefied natural gas port in Oregon, which we have existing infrastructure to get the Uinta Basin, western Colorado, and Wyoming gas to within about 250 miles of that. And there will be a resolution ran that's already being drafted that's going to support the Coos Bay LNG plant, because what is the value of sending liquefied natural gas to Oregon? Well, the secret is it's 9 days from Oregon to Tokyo. It's 10 days to Taiwan, and China's in that area. It makes it so we can sell our product. It's a world market now. We're seeing that. And certainly, if we have the ability to export and to ship natural gas to countries that want to move away from coal and the other things, it'll be a great opportunity for the state of Utah and for this area. Several years ago, I was in Estonia looking at some oil shale projects over there. Happened to be sitting with the president of the country, and they're there as we had dinner and we were talking. And the statement was made by the president of Estonia. He says, the biggest fear we have is we have one source of natural gas to run our country. And it all comes from Russia. And we pay what they tell us to pay. We pay what we have. We really would like to have a partner that gives us an option. So is there a market? Yes, I believe there is. And I think we can play a part of that. And those are some of the things we get to work on and look forward to. Thank you for all that you do. This is a great commission. It's easy to support UDOT because you're very transparent in what you do. And everybody comes and wants your money, including me at times. But the thing that I've learned as being senator, it's a balanced approach. We can't have everybody, no one can have everything, but if we do a good job planning, we can get a lot done. And I think our success with rural Utah and the highways, a lot of the big projects, we have some big infrastructure requirements still. President Niederhauser made the statement several times. He says, we spent billions of dollars on highways, and we're still behind. The only thing I can say is, what would we do if we hadn't done what we've done? And that is, we're the envy. We have done some things. The legislature has been, I would say, courageous in some of the things in transportation. We have some of our trucking and our issues that's come. You know, the issue of moving oil out of the Uinta Basin is if we don't crack that nut, we don't want to take, we want to continue to sell oil to the refineries in the state of Utah. That's an important issue. They're part of our economy and we want to do that. But if you can't move more than 90,000 under the very best of conditions, there's no way that we can grow to that 200,000 to 500,000 that companies want to produce to have infrastructure here unless we can solve that. So that's some of the issues that we're doing. Is it transportation? Maybe not. Maybe it is. It's one of those things that we get to challenge and look forward to. So thank you for your time. Thanks for the award, I guess. I'm trying to decide after I move out of the office in the Capitol what I'm going to do with some of these things. But the hat and the pin I know what to do with, so thank you. Appreciate all you've done.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Senator, we love you. Appreciate all you do.
Senator, I'm sure going to miss you. But you know how to get in touch with us. Don't forget it. You give us a ring.
He knows how to get in touch.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Senator. We'll miss you. Before next item, I would like to also say thank you, Heather Bartholm, sincere gratitude for all the detailed minutes that you provide to us. And remind the commission that when you do approve the commission of the minutes, you do the 3 of them. You do the tours, staff meetings, and also the commission meetings. So that is 3 items that most of the time she wonderfully prepares. What a detail. Thank you, thank you. Now, I would like to have a motion on the consent agenda, please.
I so move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions? Any corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9, program development. Ivan Hodel, please.
The most important one.
You're on that part yet.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Our first item for today, Region 1 is requesting a transfer of $14 million and increase of funding to the I-15 232 to I-84 project, which is currently funded $161 million. These funds will be transferred from the South Davis Express project as listed, and an increase of $3 million from the STP Bridge funds from the 2020 program. These funds will be used for structural rehabilitation and to rehabilitate sections of existing concrete pavement on mainline I-15. And I will show the map, the location running south of Layton and north of Roy on I-15. Motion is needed to approve this $14 $5,165,000 transfer as detailed.
That's the motion before us.
I move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions? Anybody would like to ask? I'll ask that. I have that question. I would like to, Chris, maybe you can explain this $11 million, where it's coming from. Good job you've done to get it back, but I would like to see how you got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Carlos is right, we're very frugal. So this is the Express Lanes project through South Davis County was this project. So it was bid as a design build project. On that project we got a very good bid, and we've already had a discussion relative to contingencies in the project. Because it was design build and the complexities with right-of-way, utilities, and some of the unknowns of what we might have the design builder might be able to do to minimize their impact, minimize their design, we held contingency in that project so that if they weren't able to minimize their design, or if there were some unknown items of scope that we missed in our RFP, then we would be able to do so and take care of those without having to come back to the Commission. Now that we've gotten to the end of the project, we've been able to eliminate significant risk with the right-of-way. We had several condemnations that we've been able to work through and not have to spend as much as we might have, as well as the design builder was able to minimize some impacts to utilities. So those dollars are left over. I should note that a portion of these monies, and you can't see them in here, but a portion of these monies, at just over $3 million, are I would call it savings that have come as a result of, I got to get the right terminology, funding exchanges with locals. And so there's $3 million of this money, of the 11, that came from the exchange, 85 cents on a dollar federal exchange rate. So we've been having that, we've kept that in the project until we go to phase 2, and that's essentially what we're doing today, is asking to move this money from phase 1, now that we didn't need it, we'll move it to phase 2 and use it there to continue the express lanes north.
Great explanation, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Chris or Ivan? Yes, please.
Just one, I should know this, I've been in this position almost 6 years, but on the motion, it talks about the approval to add 14.1 to the project. It doesn't say necessarily that it's coming from other projects, so you're lowering the commission approved amount on 4 other projects. Does that need to be specified, or as detailed work?
It's in the background.
Isn't that part of what this, all
So
this is?
when we say as detailed, it just refers to the
I assume it means as.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Okay,
I made the motion, I assumed it meant as detailed.
Okay.
No, Donna did, excuse me, I seconded
Okay.
what we said.
With that understanding, motion still stands. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Our next item, I've asked Chris to stay for this one. It's the North Salt Lake Center Street Q Cutter project. And before we get into the motion, I'd like Chris to just take a minute and talk about what a Q Cutter is and what the importance of this is.
I was about to ask Jason to Google it, but you're here. Let's see.
Before you get ahead in line.
Well,
Never mind.
I was asked to be able to be here so I could explain what a Q cutter is, so I Googled it.
Okay.
All right. And so I'm going to scroll down here, give you a little bit of background of the location, and if you watched the news or listened to the news yesterday, there was a minivan hit at a crossing, at a railroad crossing. That is this exact location.
Really?
Okay, so the purpose of this project is exactly what appeared to happen yesterday. So all I know is what I heard on the news. But what I heard was that the minivan was, the gate came down on top of the minivan, and they tried to get through and couldn't get through in time before they got hit by the train. Now nobody was seriously injured, thank goodness. But that's the purpose of the project, is to prevent a gate or a car being trapped across the tracks. So at this location, there's 3 different sets of rail lines, and if you look, there's on the graphic here, there's a stop on red sign. That's the main line track. The UTA runs across that. The front runner goes there. Just to the left, there's a Union Pacific Railroad set of tracks, and then a little bit further left, there's a 3rd set, which is, it's also labeled Union Pacific Railroad tracks. That's a spur line, and Those second two are lower speed service line where UP is making deliveries and dropping off cars and adding cars that are coming from businesses and industries in the area. What happens here is when those trains are switching on those two left sets of tracks, often that takes significant time, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Those switching operations occur. Cars will back up across the main line track. A Q cutter is intended to cut off that backup so that no cars get stranded on the track and have nowhere to go in case a train is coming. So I went, and this is the Google part. So I went and found, I believe this is somewhere in California, it doesn't matter, this is not what our project is going to look like, but you'll notice that there's a car, a gold car, sitting on top of a railroad track with a whole bunch of cars in front of it. Okay, and there's a light that's starting to turn yellow to warn cars that they need to stop and not enter that grade crossing. And then, it's not a great picture, let's see, but you'll notice that now that the light is red on the second picture, the car has stopped, the other car has cleared the intersection, so now that a train can come through. So that's what a Q cutter is. It's a traffic signal that we're going to install on Center Street in North Salt Lake so that when those switching operations or when those gates are going to come down on those two secondary tracks, it will prohibit or stop the cars from entering into the main line crossing, so that if it's going to be that way for a while, they won't be stuck there and have a near tragedy or tragedy occur like happened just yesterday. Okay.
Great. Do we have a partnership with UTA to help pay for that?
So we do. Their portion is much smaller than our portion, but they do have about a 10% partnership with us in the cost of this project.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
With that understanding, Region 1 is requesting to transfer $650,000 to the North Salt Lake Center Street Q Cutter project that is currently funded at $300,000. This money will be transferred from their master pin, the Railroad Crossing Program master pin. As stated in the fact sheet, this is the first Q Cutter signal in the state and located in this complex area as Chris has talked about. The motion is needed for approval to transfer $650,000 to the North Salt Lake Center Street Q Cutter project as detailed.
Motion to approve has been explained.
I need to wait for...
Yeah, you have to wait.
Yes, I need to wait for the Commissioner Holbrook. And the quorum.
Oh, that's right.
It's not of who's present, it's, so the quorum is full.
It's what's the... Okay, go ahead.
Oh. Did we have a motion then?
Yes.
I'll second.
Did you have a motion?
No, I think that Donnie did.
Donnie did.
The motion to
sorry.
approve as explained.
As explained, okay. There's a motion.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and second. Any further questions or discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Our third item is the I-80 over surplus canal deck replacement. Show where this is located. It's on I-80. Located on I-80. The Region 2 is requesting approval to transfer $1.4 million to this project, currently funded at $2.1 million. $1.2 million of this is coming from the state bridge funds, which is available to be transferred from a project I-80 East, 1700 East to East Canyon, and the remaining $200,000 will come from Region 2 transportation funds. The project was originally scoped as a deck rehabilitation. During the design state forces the repairs extensive I apologize. Repair extensive potholes on the structure, which revealed that the deck was in need of replacement rather than just rehabilitation. Additional funding requested for this project is to fund the additional scope necessary to replace the deck for this bridge. We are requesting and a motion needed to transfer $1.4 million to the I-80 over surplus canal deck replacement project as detailed.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, and item number 3. Any further questions or discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, Region 2 is requesting approval to add $2.5 million to the SR 151, which is 106 South. The Redwood Road to Jordan Gateway project was currently funded at $15 million. This project was originally awarded with bids that were more than 10% over the engineer's estimate. We used the contingencies funds that we talked about earlier for this award, which was in June of 2017. During construction, additional costs related to right-of-way and unknown utilities needing to be relocated were encountered. The utility relocation caused significant delays, over 150 days currently to the contractor. The additional $2.5 million is available from an unprogrammed funds in the pavement rehabilitation program on the 2 master pins as detailed. Motion is needed to approve the $2.5 million increase to the SR 151 Redwood Road to Jordan Gateway project as detailed.
Move to approve as explained.
So I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second. I have a question. During the Blue Stake process, do we not locate or recognize the location of the utility lines? How come it's taken that long, 150 days to do that? Brian?
Oh, you want to come in?
Yeah, he's gonna.
That's a super good question. In the urban area, utilities is a nightmare for us, and we do our very best to try to identify what the utilities are before we bid the project. The problem that we run into is that we use the data from the utility companies. So they're the ones that provide us with the files of where they think their lines are at. So we're relying on their data, on their information, which they're not, 9 times out of 10, they're not in the right location. We also struggle too with, in the urban area, we process probably, thousands of permits a year just to put new utilities in. And we know when they go put them in, they put their machines down and they bore under the road, and you don't know where they end up by the time they get across the road. So it's always a big struggle for us to really identify where the true location of those utilities are pre-bid. But as soon as we open it up, we definitely find where they really are, and it's...
Yeah.
Brian, maybe speak to, the way we pothole to try to locate them on some, but we also, they don't know sometimes that they have utilities in certain locations.
That's correct. Again, in the urban areas, we try to go out and pothole just so that we can identify the right locations, especially on our big utilities. Just so that we minimize that risk. So we go out and do that pre-bids to try to identify. But 9 times out of 10 as well, as we open it up and there's utilities that nobody even wants to claim. So I'll have to get some pictures of one of just a standard project that we have in our urban areas through an intersection. It's amazing how many utilities we really have underneath there. So
in this particular case, they didn't provide the blueprints or the maps, the locations. Do they have responsibility to pay some of the expense or no?
No. So yeah, to answer your original question about the Blue Stakes.
Okay.
Blue Stakes uses that same data that we have. They get that information from the utility companies, and they go out and they mark within 3 or 4 feet of where they think the line is at. That just protects them from, as they're excavating, that they don't damage something. But it's a guess, even with the Blue Stake companies.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead. There's a question.
There's an US West. Oh, it is in that. I don't know where it is. No idea.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought just for a minute. So, you're appropriating some funds that weren't otherwise committed. Just help me understand the process. Is that just part of your budget and you can use that like you do transportation solutions for whatever we need? Yeah. Sorry, I should pull up the actual.
No, that's just fine.
Use your terminology.
At the end of the project, at closeout or also at award, we'll go through and remove money that we do not think that we need on that project anymore. That program, many times we reprogram it directly to another project, like the previous item on our agenda.
Right.
Sometimes we don't have a project to specifically send that money to, so we just unprogram that money for future use like we're doing on this one.
Okay, very good.
So we're accumulating that balance and making sure the money's always working for us.
Excellent. I appreciate the clarification.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
If I could, I think we're seeing a couple of issues coming together here in previous discussions. We talked about contingencies, and Randy also talked a little bit about increasing construction costs. So we kind of got caught here a little bit. So we had contingencies in the project that were really meant to try to deal with the unknown utility things, because we deal with it on a lot of projects. This wasn't new to this project, but what happened is on this project, the prices came in higher than our engineer's estimate, still within the amount that the commission approved. So we proceeded with the project knowing that we were really tight on the contingencies.
Yes.
And so kind of two things came together on this project, and just to let you guys know that that's the way it happened.
Thank you.
So the 150 days delay is the labor and equipment combined?
You have some very interesting conversations with contractors when you're dealing with those types of delays, I can tell you that.
Okay.
One last comment on the utilities. In talking with the program manager, they found many deadlines on this project also. They had to treat them as live until they were able to identify it. And as Brian stated, some of those were unclaimed.
Okay.
So even though they're dead, we don't know they're dead until after we stop the project, delay it, and identify it.
Okay, thank you. So there's a, go ahead, state the motion, please.
Okay, motion needed for approval to add $2.5 million to the SR 151, 106 South Redwood Road to Jordan Gateway project as detailed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, and any further discussions?
I just got a question. It's not even related to this, but it is related, and that is that south of south of the Nephi along I-15, they're burying some stuff along inside that corridor. Is that a utility that we're a part of?
It's a fiber, I think. It's a fiber optic.
There's two big plastic tubes going in there.
That, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'll give it a shot.
The guy that drives through.
That is a fiber project that, yes, we are part of that project. And you see how far away from the highway that they're putting that?
Yeah, it's right against the fence.
Yeah, it's so that we don't wind up talking about having to move that fiber optic line in the future. So
Yeah, that was the other part of the question. It looks like we're getting smarter.
we have been. We try. When we have the room, we are very willing to move it out there, but sometimes in the urban area, you just don't have that.
Thank you for that.
Well, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 4 is carried.
Thank you. Our next item, Region 3 is requesting to increase $2 million of funds to the I-15 Provo North Interchange study. It's just currently funded at $2 million. After further work developing the scope for this project, this need was identified due to the complexity of the different options that need to be studied and the additional time that it will take for this additional work. Region 3 would like to add $2 million of TIF funds to this environmental study to bring the project value to $4 million.
Yeah, that is it.
You have to map for the, please
Mr.
go
Chairman,
ahead.
can I ask Shane to give a little bit of history on this one, please?
Go ahead.
Please. Well, he was our chief environmental engineer when this was we were actually looking at this as part of the I-15 EIS originally.
Okay. Around to see who's in the room. Yeah, when we worked on the environmental document for I-15 for the core project, we had at one time had an interchange in this location proposed. That interchange morphed into a frontage road system in the same location. We went out to public comment, and there were several people that didn't like that alternative. It wasn't necessarily integral to the reconstruction of I-15, so we pulled it out of the document so that the document could go forward with what we were trying to do, which was reconstruct I-15. At that time, we worked with Provo City and said, when it becomes necessary to study a node change or find road system in this location, we will focus on that specifically, not tie up on a 35-mile corridor. That's what this project is to find a solution to the traffic congestion at both Center Street in Provo and the University Parkway interchange in Orem. That is it is the longest distance on I-15 in Utah County that doesn't have an interchange, or doesn't have access to the local system. It's something that Provo City is fully supportive with. And in fact, before we entered this study, we wanted to make sure, as the elected officials in that area turned over, that they would be lockstep with us as we move forward, and they have committed that they are. They're very, very supportive of a solution here. No one is saying exactly what that solution might be, and that's part of the normal process, but there is a need to find something in this location. And as you look at this map, the highlighted blue is the I-15 section, but what really needs to happen is we need to highlight that 820 South section that goes from I-15 into Provo. We need to study that area too. So that's part of the $2 million. It's a long section, a lot of residents in that area. It's going to take a lot of engineering analysis and a lot of public involvement to be successful here.
My question is, $2 million is going to be enough? That's a long stretch.
It is a long stretch. There are a lot of needs to reach out to. I'm going to take a guess and say yes, but that's not a guarantee. We wouldn't need to be back in the future.
Do we have a public or local participation in the money wise?
We don't in this case.
Okay.
No, this is, you'll hear about this project.
Okay.
You'll hear about this process, and depending how it goes, we could be back with the commission.
Okay. State a motion item, please.
Motion needed to add an additional $2 million of TIF funds to the I-15 Provo North interchange study as detailed.
I'll move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussions or questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Number 5, motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our next item on the agenda is a state infrastructure bank update. In the December 2017 commission, we approved the Transportation Commission meeting. The commission approved a loan for $10 million to the MIDA, which is with an interest rate of 2.25% and a 15-year loan.
You need to explain what MIDA stands for, Ivan, please.
The
Military, I help you.
Military Installation Development Authority.
Thank you.
I want to make sure that I got that right. The following legislative session, the loan amount that was previously identified at $10 million was increased to another $4 million, so a total of $14 million to this state infrastructure bank. The UDOT Commission needs to we need the Commission's approval to enter into a loan agreement for this updated amount of $14 million. Also included is the amortization schedule. It was updated, the last update, and this is another thank you to Heather. At 8/32, I believe, was the final submission for our amortization chart. You'll notice that the repayment period does not start until October 10th of 2023, which it's stated as a 10-year loan, but the payment period does not start for 5 years, and the interest has been is then accumulated for those first 5 years and added to the loan, which shows the loan amount, instead of being $14 million, the loan amount ends up being $15,647,000.
So you're not changing the rates or duration, just a deferred payment for 5 years?
Correct.
Okay. Just the $4 million extra.
$4 million extra as detail, or as included in the Senate Bill 110 last year, or this past legislative session.
That's the motion before commission.
So the motion is needed to approve the SIB loan request for MIDA as detailed.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
maybe I can ask now, why are we doing this? Why is got involved in this thing? I'm just surprised at how many other loans, I remember we talked about the infrastructure bank in the past, but how many other loans we have? We only have 1 or 2 others, don't we?
Oh, no.
Oh, no, there's a.
You got lots?
There's an
Quite a few.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is more of the same.
More of the same.
Okay.
More of the same.
This one, this is a little unique in that it was specified by the legislature.
Yeah.
Normally, the legislature will capitalize it and communities will come in and request loans in the commission. So you're essentially being asked to rubber stamp a legislative decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
And if we don't? I shouldn't have asked that question. Okay.
We're all in this together. We're all in this together.
I apologize.
He's looking for motion, not the... Anyone?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. There's a motion.
Second.
And the second. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Chair. Looking at this, and again, maybe it's just a point of clarification, but line 93 in the background that you've prepared for us references, it makes a change from 19 to $39 million, so there's an additional $20 million. Has that already come into the fund?
That's, Shane, you want to, that's
Sure.
the council.
Yeah, it has come into the fund. Part of the legislation that we didn't include was the direction to loan the Salt Lake County $20 million, which they applied for
A couple of months
ago.
So this is relative to the parking, am I remembering correctly, the parking structure? Okay, thank you.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have now the corridor preservation. Charles Stilmont, please.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Particularly public-private partnership.
Thank you, commissioners.
This is the record number of requests. Diane, you sure you want to spend this much money?
Diane has been very, very busy, much as she was last month. I think you'll see another set of miracles as we review these on Diane's part. Very quickly, a review of the budget and obligations for the Marta Dilry Corridor Preservation Fund. The current balance forward is a little over $8.3 million. The Mount View Corridor Fund reimbursement of a hair under $9.5 million shows as pending, but I understand it has been completed. This report is as of the very end of September that it completed in the last week and a half or so. This is just a little bit outdated. We use the same report we used with the advisory council who met last week when it hadn't been completed, but that funding is now in the Corridor Preservation Fund. We had just a hair under $800,000 in revenue over that month, expenditures of $165,858, resolving approved corridor preservation purchases, leaving a balance of a hair over $18 million, 18.3. There's a report here of approximately 10.5 million that are obligated but not yet dispersed. These are approved acquisitions that have already run through the commission that are still in process. We can't sign contracts until we have your approval, and then that takes a little bit of time to run through, and Diane works hard, not just getting them to this point, but then bringing them through and closing them out. Considering those obligations, the fund balance is just a little bit under 7.9 million. You'll see the pending applications that we'll discuss today have a total value of a little over 4.3 million, which would leave a fund balance of 3.5. We expect with Mountain View Corridor, with a few things that are in process there, to be able to submit additional reimbursement requests to help replenish this fund over the next month, and hopefully before we come back to the commission in November.
Any question about the balance? Go ahead, proceed.
Thank you very much. The first request involves, the first three actually involve 3 parcels in Pleasant Grove and Linden. There's a development that crosses the city borders down in Utah County involving some eminent development. I'm going to scroll down just so you can get a sense of this development. You can see the areas in green will be one request. The areas outlined to the right of the chart and have the Omega written in is a second. And then a third is kind of in pink, the KWFFG area. There's a fourth that you see marked on here, FFG, on the corner of Pleasant Grove Boulevard and I believe that's Embassy Grove Parkway, that Diane is working on, but that is not part of our presentation today. It's not quite to that point.
Just to orient everybody about where these parcels are, you can see here there's an arrow to I-15. This is not very far off of I-15 in Pleasant Grove. Between this pending and imminent development and I-15, there are a number of office buildings that have already been constructed. This is an area that's growing very rapidly, and this is an opportunity for UDOT to get out in front of another development. The first request involves, again, these areas in green. You'll see that we are attempting to purchase from the developer Valley Grove and Associates approximately 79,400 square feet with an additional 30,900 for a public utility easement. The commission has already approved a portion of this when we had the first round of appraisals completed on 1.1 million. Now that we have all the appraisals completed, the landowners requested that we do it all at once. So this would be, there are two ways to look at this, either a request for an additional 936,100 or a request for a total of $2,036,100, where 1.1 had previously been approved but has not yet been closed, and that is the request that we would make on this particular item, that we be permitted to move forward with a $2,036,100 acquisition from Valley Grove and Associates.
So that's the request, $2,036,000.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm a member of the committee, as you may know, and
yes.
I recuse myself from this transaction. That's one of our clients, and a very good client, and I'm not voting on that one.
Okay. Then Chair has the option to vote for it. Go ahead. I need a motion.
I so move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussions?
Do I recall that this was just taking a piece off of their property?
That's correct. It strip takes along SR 139 and 135, excuse me, 129 and 135 Pleasant Grove Boulevard, North County Boulevard. They would be a portion and fee for the roadway construction with a public utility easement along it.
And it just, the appraisal came in higher than we expected?
Not exactly. This was because of the way this parcel is cordoned off and what the property owner owned, we were able to originally appraise a portion of it. We moved forward thinking that we had a deal. Now that we have the remainder of the development fully appraised, the landowners requested that we do it all together rather than in separate transactions.
Thanks for that clarity.
Yep.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Recused or abstaining.
Make sure it's noted.
They're all
Heather,
about that
please.
in the minutes.
Thank you. Next.
Item B is another parcel in this area. It's the Omega parcel that we saw a moment ago. They had a planned office building to be constructed in this area. With our proposed acquisition for the North County Boulevard project, it would not be possible to build an office, or certainly not an economically viable office. So they requested that we purchase the entire parcel from them. That would be approximately 46,620 square feet at an appraised value of $816,000. That's the request that we would make of the commission today, as approval to proceed with that. This image here shows the parcel and the portion needed for right-of-way, leaving a very small uneconomic remnant right there, and hence the request for an acquisition of the total triangular piece. I would note this parcel shows right where the line is. You can see the Linden City, Pleasant Grove City line. This one sits in Linden, not Pleasant Grove.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any further discussions, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 3 is the KWFFG. I think KW is Kip Wadsworth and FFG is a something food group. I suspect they have some sort of fast food restaurant plan for this area. They purchased a portion of this larger development that we spoke about in item A a moment ago, and they were aware of our future needs and that our corridor preservation fund would potentially be used here. They've agreed to an acquisition of 4,060 square feet plus 1,562 for a public utility easement at an appraised value of $96,800. That is the request that we would make of the commission today, and I'll go ahead and scroll down and just remind you where along this development and proposed project that parcel sits.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I seek to accuse myself on this. These are other clients of ours.
Oh, great.
So this is, Utah County's booming.
Okay. That's the motion before us.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstaining.
Okay, so noted. Thank you.
Our next item is State Route 73 in Eagle Mountain. You'll recall last month we had several homes that were under the future proposed alignment of an expanded SR 73. This is another example of such a home. Individuals who've learned about our project and are not interested in writing out the challenges of sitting in a home that everybody knows will eventually be under a road. They have a 6-bedroom, 3-bath home, 2,550 square feet that sits on 1.04 acres. It has an appraised value of $390,000. We would request the Commission's permission to move forward with an acquisition of that home, and I'll scroll down just so you can get an idea of the impact that our future project will have on this home.
Looks like it has great access.
It looks like they could have a home right between the frontage road and the interstate. Maybe they couldn't use their garage. I'm not sure that it would comply with access requirements to give them an access point there. I'm fairly certain it would not. And I'm joking, and maybe for the record I should clarify, it absolutely would not.
They'd be asking us for sound walls.
Yeah. I can't imagine what we would have to do to mitigate the impacts on this parcel.
What's our kind of tentative timeline on this?
I'm going to defer to Region 3. Are we about 5 years?
Right.
Like approximately 5.
Right now, our TIP program is funded out to 2024, a little bit to 2025, so that would be the earliest is 2025. We'll put this in the prioritization process and rank it accordingly. Right now, it is not in that process. It's not on the next phase of funding, but because of the growth out there, I suspect it'll rise up pretty quickly.
Sure, thank you.
So open for the motion. Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussions, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Number D carries.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think that this whole area, these are the, I don't know, probably the 8th or 9th request that we've had out in this SR Sanctuary area. I think you're going to find that this is going to continue. As soon as we put those lines on top of homes, we get very nervous, and I don't blame them at all. I think this is really what the Corridor Preservation Fund was set up to do. This is exactly the situation we had on SR 89 up in Layton. We started putting lines on homes, and those people got nervous, and so the fund was established to take care of those folks. And so I suspect to see SR 73 requests from now for quite a while every month. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
with every public involvement engagement that happens, Dan has a number of requests and moves forward as quickly as she can with those. The next item on the agenda is item 10E. It's also on SR 73, 9482 North Bobcat Way, again in Eagle Mountain. A family that's been in their home for 19 years. They're of retirement age and are not interested in having to move in a few years. When the project moves forward, they'd like to go ahead and get settled into a permanent residence so that they can live out their retirement without disturbance. 5-bedroom, 3-bath home, approximately 2,450 square feet on 1.39 acres with an appraised value of $360,000. And again, that's the request that we would make of the Commission, is for your approval to proceed with the acquisition of this home. As you can see in this drawing, it sits right under the frontage road, and the acreage sits under the freeway alignment.
Okay. We open the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is seconded. Any further discussions or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Who carries?
The next item, 10F, we're moving to the Bangalore 104th South project, which is actually, my understanding is fairly close to being approved and funded as a project, so we would hope to have fund reimbursement on these acquisitions done in relatively short order. Everything moves at its own pace, but we think not in the not too distant future we'll be able to submit for reimbursement through this project and help replenish the corridor preservation fund. The first home, these homes are all nearby each other. The first home is at 10611 South Big Meadow Drive in South Jordan, a relatively new home, only about 2 years old. 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath, approximately 3,430 square feet with an appraised value of $455,000. I'll scroll down just to give you a sense of the potential impact of the project on the home. As you can see, the alignment would run right through the middle of it. And our request would be for the Commission's approval to move forward with an acquisition of this home for $455,000.
I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item 10G is just a few houses over. The Asmus parcel sits on approximately 0.11 acres, as you can see in this image. The home is 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, approximately 2,850 square feet, with an appraised value of $410,000. This is another example of a family who, upon learning about the project, was not interested in writing it out and waiting for the full acquisition process to go forward, and would like to go ahead and get the house sold so that they can move into a new location. We would request your approval to move forward with the acquisition of this property at $410,000.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussions? Diane, what kind of rent you can get out of this property or properties?
You know, probably $1,400 to $1,500 a month until the project goes through.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, there is a very strong rental market. Our property inventory and property management team would definitely put this out and try and generate a little bit of interim revenue through the rental market.
Is that internal? Do we manage that internal, or do we hire somebody to do that?
We do both. We have an
Okay.
external company that helps us, and depending on what the properties are that we're leasing, it might stay in-house if it's just a land lease or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Most of the vacant land we do in-house. With the rentals with tenants and improvements on them, we will turn those over to professional property managers, and then we have an internal property manager who keeps an eye on everything, make sure everything is being done correctly.
Thank you.
These houses don't have very big yards, do they?
It's not a thing.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, before
Yes.
Charles gets to the next one of these, I think it'd be good to put on the record that, as Charles mentioned, we do have a project in this area in the next probably, Brian, I'm not here right now, 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
At some point, we will move from corridor preservation to project acquisition.
Okay.
These property owners have been informed that would be the process, and that would be entitled to moving expenses and other reimbursements if they waited to that point, and they have chosen to go this route instead.
Okay.
But it is something that we talk about with each one of these folks, and they are making a volunteer decision to go forward with this procedure.
That's
And
good.
this actually then saves us money through the process.
It does. Yep.
But it also feels they have more control. They feel like they have more control of their destiny.
I think that's absolutely correct.
Thank you.
The final item is item 10H, and this is an example of how our project can really have an impact. The stress that we've mentioned earlier, this is one playing out in real life. This property is on the corner. I'll scroll down so you can see its location. Just to the north of the homes we were just speaking of. There's a planned detention pond on this parcel. These folks had agreed to sell their home. They had a contract that fell apart when the project announcement came out. They obviously do not expect to be able to sell their home given that project announcement, and so they've approached us and asked us to proceed with an acquisition. 5 bedroom, 2.5 bath home, approximately 3,650 square feet on 0.12 acres. with an appraised value of $430,000. We would ask the Commission's approval to proceed with the acquisition of this home at that price.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussions? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. I guess you have number 11 too, Charles.
I do. This is, oh, excuse me, I forgot we had one more on Grassy Meadow. Item 10I. I apologize, I thought we were on the line. I didn't realize how many we had. This is another example of home that will sit right under the alignment. This is next door to the home we were just speaking about. That'll be the spot for a detention basin. The home has 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, 3,270 square feet on approximately 0.21 acres. It's a corner lot, so it is a little bit bigger than some of the others. It has an appraised value of $470,000. We would ask the Commission's approval to proceed with that acquisition at that price.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussions on number I? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is done.
Great.
So item number 11, you still have
Yes,
the additional.
thank you,
bits
sorry.
on- Okay,
I got ahead of myself, I apologize.
no problem.
This is a request out of Region 4 for an addition of D Street in Fairview between 7th and 8th. I want to make sure it's not avenues, I think it's 7th and 8th Streets. To add it to the state highway system. The road had been removed sometime in the past, in the late 60s, when SR 89 was realigned and moved a little bit more to the west. I'm going to scroll down to get to a visual. You'll see here that Fairview City is in full support of this. I think the visual speaks volumes about what we would like to request. You'll see here that SR 31, as it moves east and west, connects up to SR 89. That has a north-south but a little bend over to the west at this location in Fairview. Obviously a lot of traffic that's going north on 89 and wants to get to 31 does not make the bend. Instead they go straight up D Street and connect over to SR 31. We would like to request that we add this section of D Street in Fairview to the state transportation system in order to help facilitate maintenance of this stretch of road. It gets heavy use. It is not currently on the state system. There's some pavement maintenance work going on in the area now. Adding this to the system would help facilitate keeping that road in shape, getting it in shape for the winter. And again, you'll note as part of the package that Fairview City fully supports this being added to the state system. There's a resolution in your packet, and we would, on behalf of Region 4, I'd like to request that you approve the addition of State Route 231 in Fairview as set forth in the resolution.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussions, questions?
Was this at our request, or was this a Fairview request, or did we just meet?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's one of those dialogues and everybody says, why don't we do this? And it came through to this point where everybody said, yes, that's a good idea. We can do a better job maintaining it. It's a lot of our state traffic, not local. And so it does make sense for the state to maintain it, and the city fully supports it.
Can you slide up to the map a little?
Oh, yeah.
So this is a pretty unique situation for us. Normally, we like to have our intersections square, so they come in at 90 degrees. To do that in this location means a significant relocation of a business in this community that we don't think is the right business decision. So in lieu of that, we want to add this to our system so that when you're coming from the south going north, you can make that right turn very simply. And if you're going down 4th North, you can make that right turn out. So it just completes the intersection a little bit better. The problem in this situation is just that one street was not on our roadway. So in lieu of relining the 4th North and taking out a business, we want to add this to the system.
I like it.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
You're welcome.
Nice job, Charles. It's a pleasure working with you on the committee as well. Very efficient in that charming Diane is a workhorse, so thank you for that.
No, I am constantly blown away by what Diane is able to accomplish over the course of a month, and we appreciate your time and attention to these issues. They're very important to us, and we appreciate all the time and energy you put into it.
Well, the whole concept of preserving and making this in advance of these later construction projects is a brilliant way that we do it in Utah, so thank you.
We are trying to spread the word to other states to teach them what we've learned.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Good job. Robert, you coming back, I guess?
Unless Jason wants to take it.
No.
You did so well the first time.
Thanks. It's good to be with you again today,
Welcome
Commissioners.
back.
We have a couple of administrative rules to present or to run through with you. The first one is 920-30, the State Safety Oversight Rule. We are updating this rule to take into account changes in federal code that have occurred to bring our State Safety Oversight program, or to reflect federal requirements in our State Safety Oversight program. Again, the purpose of our State Safety Oversight program is to provide a safety oversight function for UTA and their light rail transit responsibilities in the state.
Okay. Any questions from Robert on this?
No.
This is your information only.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's for
Okay.
commission review.
Right.
Any
Yeah.
comments on
we
this?
read it.
Right,
Kinda.
You read
it's
it?
fairly straightforward.
I looked through
Exciting.
the lines.
Yeah, that's-
It's dry but straightforward. We've chosen to adopt federal requirements. It's just a Utah version of them. So.
And so maybe the commission is helpful. The distinction is that it's for light rail, not for heavy rail. And FRA does that oversight over that heavy rail component. So that's front runner is the heavy rail.
Right.
So this is right now currently just in Salt Lake County where we have this oversight.
Okay,
Okay.
moving right along.
Number B.
That's good.
Right.
Oh, yeah, right.
The next item we have is Admin Rule 909-2, which is the update of the Transportation Motor Carrier Utah Size and Weight Rule. Our Motor Carrier Division has made updates to this rule based on changes in the FAST Act, definitions that change within the FAST Act, also coordination with surrounding states and their policies and practices to make it less variation between the states for industry. There's a few grammatical changes in here, and some updates to weight limits on axles. There's quite a few changes in this one. Are there any particular questions you have about this one? Okay.
You're for it, Robert. That's what we want. And the thing is, Robert said it's difficult. He's not the division director over this function.
Oh, but I am prepared with notes.
Oh, okay.
You should know then. Okay.
Okay.
From the size of the diminishing audience, we know this is very important.
Yeah.
Well, and then it goes, after this step, we submit it to the administrative rulemaking process back into the public process, so.
Most important then.
Yep.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Okay, item number 13, annual accomplishments, conditions. I guess, Elizabeth, you are up. Communication goes first, and then public transit. Ivan.
Oh, thank you, Heather. I'm really excited about this. This is my first time doing this.
We are too.
Well, thank you. All right, so you all know about Carlos's top 10 that he shared with us last year at annual conference.
10 Commandments, yes.
Well, number 3 has to do with me. And this was his quote: "Our public approval ratings will reach the highest level it's ever been." And he is having us shoot for 90%. So I have shared this graph for you so you can see where we are today, which is at 76%, and what that trend line looks like. So that's a big challenge ahead.
Set small goals.
That's right. So what we're going to talk about today is how we're going to build upon all the successes we've had so far and get to 90%. So this is just an overview of that same trend line, but on here you'll see that the campaign of Know Where, Know Why, which is no longer what we call it, but was the beginning, the genesis of this campaign that we'll be talking about today, was in 2006, and you can see a marked increase over the coming years as we had a more strategic, cohesive approach to communicating with the public about the good work that we're doing. We got another bump when we completed the core project. And so one of the things that's significant about that is in the coming years, we've got some major projects coming up. We're going to be delivering the biggest overall program that we have ever. So one of the great things is when we have mega projects like this or a very big program, we have the opportunity to take all that messaging that we would do anyway to inform the public about our construction schedule and what we're doing, to also message about why the way we do it is so beneficial to the public. So we're looking forward to that as an opportunity to get our message out there and share our story. So I'm also going to share some thoughts you've probably heard from Carlos. I have the distinct privilege of getting more time with Carlos than many other people in our organization, and I specifically get to talk with him about his ideas and how he's going to share them with the public. So the things I'm going to share with you today are very reflective of things that he says, but these are essential to how we're going to communicate in the future. In the age of acceleration, we're at an inflection point. I know that's not the first time you've heard it, but it can't be ignored. Technologically, we're seeing massive change at exponential rates. In Utah, our population is exploding. And socially, I think many of us can feel that there's a shift going on, and it is basically commensurate with the rate of technological change because of the impact of our diversified communications platforms, which we'll look at in a minute, and the huge impact of social media, where people can share out stories or messages that they find pertinent to them. So we'll also talk about how we're leveraging that. We're having to take this approach of how might we? That's the way that I think about it. So when we look at a problem, what is the core problem or challenge that we're trying to solve? So for example, if you're looking at a budget, you have two ways of going about managing your budget. You can spend less, you can make more, or you can try to do both. And so when we look at throughput, similarly, we've typically had the paradigm of looking at how can we get more vehicles through a corridor? How can we get the most throughput possible? When we look at that challenge now, it's about definition. So how are we defining throughput? One option is to look at throughput as being defined, how can we get the most people through a corridor, the most goods and services? And that is a slightly different angle on the same challenge. So we're starting to shift how we come at things. And we're going to take that same approach with everything we're doing from a communications perspective. When we look at the challenge, what are all the different ways that we can attack that? And preferably not come at it one way or the other, but both or all. Another process that's taking off at UDOT right now is design thinking. And this is for wicked problems, so difficult to solve challenges, which I think we can all agree we're facing right now. And two of the goals are to come up with lots and lots of solutions and to do it fast. So this process was created by engineers, actually in the technology sector. And the idea was that they would have projects that were 4 to 6 weeks. They would be pulling together people who had never worked together, and they'd have to solve something fast. So we are co-opting that process internally, and part of that is to prototype, prototype, prototype. So through that process, you just try things out on a small scale, a low-risk scale, and see how they work, and when something works, you implement it. So we're trying to move toward that direction. One thing that Shane has said that you may have heard is that failure is just feedback. It's telling you something that's not working, so you can move on from that and try something else. And then the next thing in terms of paradigm shift is moving beyond incentives. So when we look at trying to facilitate behavior change, getting people to use some of our travel-wise strategies like carpooling and changing their commute times, we need to think about what are incentives that work, and are incentives the right way to go? We need to reimagine what carrots and sticks look like, and what are things that really motivate human behavior. So on that note, one of the things that really motivates us is finding the easiest path forward, always. And rather than judging that, just accepting that part of our survival as a species was finding the most energy effective way of doing everything. And in today's world, we have really, really easy ways of doing almost everything. So that's the bar we're working with. A lot of you have probably heard of KISS, Keep It Simple Stupid. In our communications team, we're going with Keep It Stupid Simple. It just needs to be easy. So that's our approach. And when we think about that, I would say that UDOT offers an incredible product. So if we are an organization that is selling something, which we aren't, but we are an organization with customers and clients and shareholders, we have a fantastic product. It's safe, it's technologically sound, and it's excellent quality. And the next step toward getting to that 90% is thinking, what's the user experience like? How do people feel when they get into a car or onto a train or onto a bus? Because we need to be looking at the transportation system overall, not just our roads. And how can we leverage that to change the way people feel about their transportation experience? And finally, one thing that Carlos has said that really resonates with me is that transportation is the circulatory system of our society. When it's functioning well, you don't even notice it, but it's the lifeblood of everything that happens. It encourages quality of life and economic development, and when it's not working, you really, really feel it. And so that's just something to keep in mind, is that transportation isn't the first thing that people typically think of when they think about quality of life especially, but it touches on, as we talked about when we talked about the prioritization process, it touches on so many parts of the way we live. So with all of that in mind, I alluded to this, but we have to throw every resource we've got at tackling this challenge of meeting the demand of our growing population and increasing VMT. One thing that we've been doing over the past several years is having all of our major campaigns meet together once a month. So that's Zero Fatalities, TravelWise, and the UDOT communication effort. The reason for that is that it's essential that we cross-pollinate our messages. So when we're talking about construction, we also need to be talking about options that people have for using TravelWise strategies. And when we're talking about Zero Fatalities, what are some of those strategies that help with safety as well? That's been something that at the beginning, I think every meeting we had, we were like, who has the agenda? Who owns this? Exactly what are we talking about? But every time the conversations were really productive. And as that's evolved over the past several years, this has become one of the meetings that I look forward to most. And you can see the consultants that we work with feverishly taking notes, and you're really starting to hear that cross-pollination in all of our campaign messages. All right, so this is that diversification that we were talking about with platforms where people get their information. So we do this annually. You've seen it before. I'm just going to point out a couple of key findings from this past year. So TV is down by about half in the past 5 years, so since 2013. We have scaled back our spend on media and TV for that reason, but we're still making a pretty sizable investment. We've gotten a lot of value out of having these positive relationships with media outlets, and where that comes in is not necessarily having great positive stories, as you'll see, but when we have a message we need to get out, we can pretty well rely on the news stations to be willing to pick up our stories and get that information out there. It's an easy sell with them. They're happy to do it. The other thing that you'll see is that social media has doubled in the past 5 years. So we're starting to ramp up our investment there. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other strategies that are low cost, but pretty strategic, that Zach Whitney, who's typically here with Grant, is leading out for us. Radio is holding steady as one of the most common ways that people get their information. And same thing with our overhead messaging boards. That is the #1 way that people say they get information. So last year, Joe shared with you his goal of having UDOT be the most video-centric organization, the most video-centric DOT in the country. And that's something that we have stuck with and continue to invest in. So Grant and Zach, I think many of you know, came from news. They are very talented videographers, and that's been a real asset to have them internally. They're very quick, so they put out a lot of content for us, which is really crucial for social media, where you need to be able to put out fresh content all the time. So they're doing really fantastic work there. Joe has initiated an internal news bureau, so he's gathering stories from all over our organization so that we can tell our own story. Our solution to the problem of having so many platforms that we can communicate across, where it's very scattered, is that we're centralizing having our own content, B-roll, stories that are ready to go, so that when the media is interested in something, they can come to us with something that's basically pre-packaged. They can put their own spin on it and it's ready to go. And then, as you know, John Gleason is our spokesperson. He won some awards this year for his great work. He truly is the best PIO in the state, and we're very lucky to have him.
He's the first guy I saw on TV this morning.
I was going to say, me too, yes.
Every morning you can get an early glimpse at John. He is up early every day, he works weekends, and he has a great relationship with all media outlets. We're very lucky to have him. So what I'm about to share with you is an example of a video. So every time we post a video on social media, it explodes. And one of the things that's great about that is that people share these with each other. And like I said, this is a low-cost way where we can produce one video, put it out there, and then the social network does its job of distributing it for us. These aerial view videos are particularly beloved by the public, and this one that we're going to look at right now is it's before and after. So people have really liked this. It'll show before, during construction, and when we can, after, so that people can see exactly what happened on each project. So I'm going to play this for you now. So part of the reason these are, oh, no, we don't, I mean, we want to see it again, but we don't have time. One of the reasons these are so effective is one of the great benefits we offer is we do a lot of night and weekend work so that we're out of the way of drivers. A byproduct of that is that they often see roads that appear to be under construction with no one doing work on them. So we've heard that anecdotally. So one thing that's great about this is that it allows people to see that progress, and it also invites them to have virtual access to a project so they can see what's happening as it's happening. So when someone comes to us, which does happen, and they say, "What are you doing on this road? I'm not seeing anyone," we can show them exactly what we're doing. So our goal is to be overwhelmingly neutral in our media coverage, and we're succeeding at that. It's about split on our positive and negative stories, and the overwhelming majority is neutral. This is just a look at our budget for the UDOT communication, which was formerly UDOT traffic budget. So that orange is our media buys, those are direct media buys, and then the blue is our PI, or our PR and PI. So that's all of our on-the-ground work, face-to-face interaction with hotel concierges, the trucking association, our stakeholders. And then one thing I just want to mention is I just said now that this is formerly the UDOT traffic effort, and prior to that had been Nowhere, No Why. It was very construction project focused. We talked about this earlier with our TMT group, our campaign collective effort, but we're going toward a broader approach where this is not just about construction. This is leveraging our consultant resources to communicate messages more broadly. Another campaign that is funded by the money that you have graciously provided us in the past years is TravelWise, which we've talked about a bit. We did a major research effort in this past year, so I'm just going to quickly share with you some of the most important findings. The last time we did research on this, our overall campaign awareness was at about 20%, so we've seen that double, which is fantastic, and that was better than we thought it would be. And then the tag of Rethink Your Trip was up from about 8% to 24%. So that was a very big increase over the past several years. Some of the key insights from this was, like I said, it was better than we thought it would be, and also that the younger population, that millennial group from 18 to 34, is more receptive to messages and more willing to change their driving behaviors. You've probably heard that a lot of millennials don't want to drive anyway, so they're happy to hear about other options for what they can do other than driving their own vehicle. What we found was that they actually do know what a lot of the options are, and that's not exclusive to millennials. People in general know what their options are, but they're not making a connection between those options and how it benefits them personally. One paradigm that John Gleason uses when he's thinking about a media story is think about the with them. What's in it for me? Why should they care? And so we need to be thinking about making that connection really direct and simple for people. So we're transitioning away from talking about facts. That's something that we've heard in UCare research as well, is that people don't respond to facts about really anything, including traffic and environment, but they definitely respond to messages about how this is going to make their lives better. So as a result of this research, we launched a campaign called Me Heroes. It was very targeted to millennials, that group that we identified as being receptive. That felt like the best potential return on investment. I won't show you any videos because I know we're trying to get one of you on a plane, so we'll just move forward with that. But this was wildly successful. So these were funny because when our consultant came back to us with these, Joe did not like these at all. One of them showed a young man who was telecommuting. He was working from his kitchen, and he had a tie and a cardigan and a button-down shirt, and then was wearing his boxers, and he was just comfortable and happy at home. Joe hated it. I was cracking up. This one where the girl falls asleep and she's the narcoleptic Captain Planet was great for me. Anyway, this was a great example of, as a millennial, this totally resonated with me. And what we saw was that we were way above the baseline market expectations for video click-through and also for people watching it and sharing it. I mean, we're talking like 50% above the baseline. So that was really, really successful. So we're going to continue that campaign. We'll potentially do 1 or 2 more spots, and we'll continue running the ones that were successful in this past year. All right, so we're going to return to the 90% challenge and just talk about a couple things we're going to be doing moving forward in the coming year. I'm calling FY 2018 the year of research. We are forging new ground, especially with things like the road usage charge coming up, potential P3s. We've got a lot that's new on our plates, and there are some very basic questions that we don't know the answers to yet about our audience, such as, what do they even know about how transportation is funded? Before we talk to them about funding it differently or treating our system differently, what do they know? It appears from research from other states that is a pretty low bar, but we need to understand what that looks like in Utah. The next thing is coalition building. So I've talked a little bit about how we're doing that with our campaigns, but this is both internally and with our external partners. So we're coordinating really closely with planning, so that prioritization effort, talking to Jeff and our new planners that are coming in. So that will be helpful. And then we're also working with UCare, the Salt Lake Chamber, Envision Utah. Basically anybody who has research who's going out there and communicating, we're sitting down together. And the benefits of that are that people will get repetition. They're going to hear the same messages coming to them from a bunch of different sources. And then also we can pool resources. So for example, the Housing Gap Coalition that the Chamber has put together did a huge effort on attitudes toward housing in particular, and also what their communities feel like, and transportation was tied into that. So we were one of the contributors to that research, and now we're talking with them about what are the strategies that they're going to use and how can we support that from a transportation side. Next, increasing awareness about options that people have for behavior change, and also understanding how their decisions, even for things like land use, and then their desires for transportation and desires for how their communities feel. What are potential trade-offs when they're making those decisions, so that those are informed decisions where they understand consequences of what they choose. And then finally, with our travel-wise messaging, we're looking at a multi-phased approach here and also multi-frontal. And when I say multi-phased, what I mean is that over the coming year, in our outreach for construction, we're being more overt and more direct, talking about travel-wise strategies. That's a pretty soft way to start getting into things, but as our partners start talking more about community development, land use, economic growth, tying into that and making it a more cohesive, repetitious messaging outreach. And then finally, an area that we haven't focused on specifically as part of this effort and these campaigns is our boots on the ground. So we have really fantastic public involvement teams that go out on projects, and we haven't necessarily had as cohesive a strategy for getting all of those project teams to work together for specific goals. So that will be one of the things that we're doing over the next couple of years. And then also, nothing can replace that face-to-face. And I think that that's something that a lot of us feel as a lot of our communication becomes on our phones and on our computers. So bringing back that face-to-face, but asking ourselves, how can we use technology to make that the most effective it can possibly be? How can we centralize information we have about neighborhoods that we work with so that all of our consultants and we at UDOT understand the culture of an area that we're going into before we step into a project? And then also, how can we do analytics on that so that we're more strategic and we're getting the best return on investment for what we do? That's it. That's the tiny amount of information I have to share with you.
Thank you.
I'm really excited about this. It's a big time in transportation. It's a cool time to be in transportation. Do you have any questions?
Elizabeth, the one piece you weren't completely explicit on.
Yes.
Is you showed it in the early slide how much money they had funded in the past. Did you say how much you would think you need for next year?
No, I didn't even know I was allowed to. I sidestepped that one. So I talked about.
Bring that slide up.
Pardon me?
Why don't you bring up the slide where you showed the money you spent?
So that one was just for, this is portioned out into 3 different budgets. So that 600,000 that I showed you, that was our media and PR, was specifically just for the UDOT communications. And so we also have 100,000 that's going toward TravelWise, and then we have 100,000 that's set aside for additional outreach. So that's on a small contract basis as needed throughout the year. One of my hopes for the coming year is that we can create a centralized database that has historically been used by companies for marketing and sales, where we can take all of the databases that we have from projects. So on every single project, for years and years, we've been asking teams to turn in the contact information and record of communications that they've had with anybody who contacts us from the public during the project. We have all of those, but they're separate files for every project, and they're all different formats. So some of them are Word documents with a list, some of them are Excel spreadsheets. They're all over the map. So one of the things that we want to do is put that into a database that also has underlying analytics. And it has a bunch of different capabilities, but the first things first, let's just get those in one place. And another great thing about this is you've seen some of the benefits of moving toward GIS, where you can visualize information. A platform like this would allow you to do that too. This is great from a communications perspective, but it's also really great for our project managers so that they could look at a project ahead of time and have a better sense of what they're going to need for a communications scope. So that's one big effort where I can foresee we may potentially need some money to be able to purchase that software.
So how much money? What we'll do is, I don't know if she's ready for that then. So what we'll do during the commission workshop, where we go through the different programs, we'll be able to then identify what money she would need to accomplish what she's trying to accomplish here. So she basically reported on what she's accomplished to date, some vision of what she wants to do, but we need to put some work into being specific and providing you with a number that we would be asking you for.
Excellent work. Thank you.
You do a lot with a little bit.
Thank you.
That's extraordinary.
Yep.
We have a pretty terrific team. We've got a great team with a lot of different skills, and they're the best people I know in the industry, which is really saying something.
It's my sense that you're having fun.
It's okay. Yeah. No, I'm having a great time. I feel really lucky to be able to say, truly, I love getting up in the morning and coming to my job.
Good job. Carlos?
Mr. Chair,
Great
just-
storytelling.
Just to give you an idea of the potential here. If you think I-15 is congested today, and if you think it might get congested in the future, if you look to 2040, if we were to increase double vehicle occupancy, so today we run about 1.1 people, and I don't know who the 1.1 is, or the 1.15 people per car. That's our vehicle occupancy in the rural area. If we could double that, we wouldn't have to do any more infrastructure capacity improvements.
Did you mean in the urban area?
It's 1.15 in the urban area.
Okay.
To give you an idea of what the potential could be if people would just do a little bit of shifting of what they do. If they'd carpool a little more, or telecommute. There's a lot of potential here.
It's worth every penny to get those kind of savings. That's great.
We'll try our job to help you. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you.
Thank
I
you
appreciate
very
it. And
much.
thank you for this opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Public transit, Ivan, would you please come back?
Thank you. I should have figured out how to go before Elizabeth, not try to follow that. Heather, do you want to pull that side up? Do you want me to?
Lesser frustration.
Hit escape button.
Oh, sorry. You're not presentation.
All right, the one on the right. I'm not a presentation guy, she says, so here we go, let's try. I'm here to talk about the public transit team for UDOT. Our public transit focuses on the rural areas. Their market, if you will, is the elderly and disabled. That's where we are able to spend our time and our efforts. Essentially, what we are in public transit in UDOT, we are 100% federally funded. We take the money that we receive in grants, and we meet with vendors and providers and work with them to utilize that federal funding to improve and increase their capacity to provide services to the citizens of Utah. As an overview, historically we've been right around a $9 million total for the last several years. We get about a 1% increase is the anticipated increase. In 2018, it's nearly a $2 million increase. That $2 million increase is targeted into two different areas, the rural fixed transit and the bus and bus facilities, which those two really go hand in hand. It's the bus providers. We're anticipating we're not the only state that received that. It was a statewide, all states that participate received that increase of apportionment. The challenge with that is where we don't actually spend the money, much of this money is matched money. So if we don't have a provider that can come to the table with their percentage match, we can't utilize that money. So we spent a lot of time working with providers, trying to come up with ideas, suggestions, ways that we've see other providers be successful in it. As a financial overview, the figures that were on this chart here, the overview, are only active grants. We're trying to close out any historical. You notice that in 2009, we have the green bars are the awarded, the red is obligated, and the gray is expended. And as soon as we can close out these grants, because it's a federal program, we've got to close them out on the federal systems, then these will come off of our charts here. But this shows the money that we currently still have operating. So in 2012, we really only have a couple $100,000 left in that program. These are the different types of grants that we have available to us. This particular grant is the 5310 grant, which is the seniors and individuals with disabilities. We're able to see in 2013 we're close to closing that grant out, and we still have some work to do on the 2014 and 2015. This appears that we do not have projects in place. We received $481,000 and we've only obligated $248,000. we have letters of intent from all of our service providers, but this is part of that challenge of they have to come to the table with a matched fund, and until they do that, we can't obligate, because we can only obligate when we have their money also available at the table. So we have money available to program, we have providers that we're able to work with, but we're just waiting for them to be able to say, now you can go order our bus, help us with our facility, those kinds of things. Our next item is the fixed transit, our fixed route. You see that it's a little easier for us to meet with those providers and have their match. And we still have a couple of open grants historically that we're trying to close. Our target in this year is to clean not only the previous year, but we really want to bring more current funding, more current years, and close the historical years. Our rural bus and bus facilities, we've almost completely matched and closed out the 2015 and 2016 year. And our statewide funding, we receive money every year that we're able to pass to providers through the state for their planning efforts. And this graph here shows us the money that we've been able to supply to those particular providers. Park City being the largest, and Cache Valley down here with a current contract amount of $8,500. As far as performance of our fixed route, we have 4 that we're currently tracking: Park City, Cache Valley, the Uinta Basin, and Cedar City Area Transit. This is a 4-year summary. So in the past 4 years, Park City's provided nearly 2 million miles on vehicles that we have an interest in. This particular chart is one of my favorite. It kind of tells the story of the activities that we work with for each one of these service providers. By hovering over a particular one, if we were looking at Cache Valley employment, it shows the total miles. This is again is a 4-year summary. Total miles, total trips, the disabled trips 65 plus, how many vehicles that they have that we have a interest in, and the days those vehicles were being used. This is the senior and job access trips, where we have, as part of the program, it's not just, or the target is to take seniors and disabled to not only medical treatments, but also back and forth to job opportunities for them. Shows the activities of the providers for the year.
Before you go past that,
yeah,
go back to that last slide. So the purple, is that?
So we have the ADA trips, elderly trips, and the low income trips.
So we had a peak in 2016. Did you like it that way, and it's dramatically different now, or do we like it where it is now?
We like it that way. We want to have more. We're a little. This is brand new information to us. Up until about a month ago, we didn't have access to this information. So one of our data guy that's working on this, when we started reviewing our presentation, every one of these charts says we're under review. These numbers could be suspect, but we've got a high confidence interval of them. This particular one, we either believe that one of the providers accidentally inflated their numbers, or we're missing some of the other records.
Gotcha.
It is definitely an anomaly.
Thank you.
But as seen above, we have the money that we can provide to those service providers when they're ready. The last one shows the vehicles usage, all of the programs that we support with our providers and their particular activities that they used with them. And then the very last section just goes through and gives a narrative about each one of these programs. So we don't really have an ask, as this is 100% federally funded. So this was our first attempt in public transit to be able to show what are we doing with the money that we're receiving from the federal government, who's using it, and what are they using it for. So that's our public transit presentation.
I was out of the room for for that first bit. So how much money do we get from the federal government to make this happen?
Historically, it's been, slide up to this top graph. Historically, it's been just under $9 million. It's increases about 1% per year, but we have a $2 million increase this year, adding buses and bus facilities.
Thank you.
Our biggest user of that is the Park City with their electronic bus program that we're trying to help them secure vehicles on. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, last item is that November meeting is in Moab, 15 and 16. December will be in the UDOT complex. Any further questions, answers, any consent from commission? UDOT?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just as we did last year, we would like to host a little luncheon during the December meeting.
Okay.
You know, if any of your family members or friends would you'd like to bring along, we'd welcome them. Heather will work with you, right, Heather?
Yeah.
Can coordinate this. So we hope that you have the time to.
That would be wonderful. If there's no questions,
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Just a comment.
Yes.
The report is that on October 25th, Thursday, will be the last meetings that we will have at UTA. Hooray. November 1, the three amigos take over. Right now there are two amigos. But it's been a very interesting ride. And Senate Bill 136, I finally agree. I believe it has a chance of being successful. We've put a lot of work into it these last 3 months. They task a pretty vigorous pathway to accomplish things on our end. And the only disrupting part of it that might not have been good is it scared so many good employees at UT. A lot of them bailed out. And we lost some institutional memory there. And that they'll have to find that somewhere else. But in the end of the day, I think the legislation is going to work out just fine and make a better relationship between UTA and DOT.
Yes, indeed.
And the citizens of our state, which is pretty
Yeah,
good.
the people we serve.
Well, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Catch the plane, Lou.
We're